Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the September 4th, 2019 City of Murfreesboro Planning Commission meeting. We will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum present, so we will begin with, we do have a couple of items of old business that we will start with tonight. The first thing we have is a zoning application for approximately 24.15 acres located along Shelbyville Pike to amend the marketplace at Savannah Ridge PUD to modify the site and building design. Baker Story McDonald is the applicant. Ms. Rush. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair Jones, Commissioners. The applicant, Baker Story McDonald, has requested to modify the pattern book for the marketplace at Savannah Ridge Plan Unit Development. And the modification is to allow changes to the location of where the stormwater management areas would have been located. Also, some of the building placement and also architectural changes. Last month, the Planning Commission conducted the public hearing on August 7th, 2019, and deferred the requested rezoning to allow the applicant time to improve the building elevations presented. The revised elevations were included with the staff report attached to the agenda and are also in the revised pattern book. I know you have a few things on your desks before you, so this is the revised pattern book that includes the new elevations for your reference. The applicant's representative is here this evening to present the elevations. The public hearing was conducted and closed on August 7th, so there is no need for a new public hearing for this item tonight. The Planning Commission will then need to discuss the revisions and zoning request and formulate a recommendation to the City Council. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, who's here to present? Good evening.
Chairman, we got it. Miranda, thanks. I'm Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here with Steve Meyer from MGM Architects. As was mentioned, the primary concern was basically getting a little bit more definition to the architecture. So Mr. Meyer is going to take care of that. And if there's any questions regarding the site plan, I'd be glad to answer those as soon as we're finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Clyde. Steve Marr, MJM Architects, Nashville. As you understand, this is an amended submittal. Some of the architecture has changed along with the site plan. Some of the tenants have been better defined, and some of the uses to the buildings have been better defined, allowing us to then take the project a bit further in terms of the detail of the architecture. It's clear who one of the anchors is going to be for this project, and that is the corner element that you see here. What we've tried to accomplish with the overall is unify the materials. Our intent is a fairly rich material palette coordinated across all the buildings on the property. What you're seeing here is the primary entrance. If you look down in the bottom left corner, you see a key plan. One of the things I think that was helpful in this particular update was we identified the materials on each of the elevations as well as all of the positions of the buildings that we're looking at in the elevations. We have some of the residential elements. I'm going to need some help going back. Let's see here. So again, starting with the primary retailers here and the associated shops buildings, you can see in the site plan where that is located directly at the entrance to the retail. You can see the palette list here. The primary materials on this, on all the architecture, is masonry, brick, multiple types of brick, and also natural stone. There is some ephes and synthetic stucco or stucco utilized throughout the space as a secondary material. We've also introduced some additional architectural metal panels on the primary retailer's facade here, and we've carried some of the other unique materials. This cementitious product here throughout the rest of the center as well. You know, the buildings primarily and fundamentally are designed around your recently published guidelines and updated to address those specifically. First and foremost is the base, the body, and the cap for all the buildings. And you can see how we've attempted to carry the materials and the detailing and the architecture throughout all the different shops buildings. This is an example of a shops building right at the entrance to the facility, directly in front of the anchor building. Same type of architecture, again, the base. We've introduced that same material palette through. We've tried to incorporate those materials to better balance the overall architecture of the site. We believe we didn't go for a symmetrical design necessarily, but it's more of an intentional composition of materials and elements. Again, referring back to your guidelines for guidance on that. One building on the site is a larger footprint. It's likely, there's a couple of different options for this particular building, but as allowed by the guidelines, it takes on more of a monumental scale. It appears to be 2 stories, likely going to be a single story. We've taken care to define the entry, incorporate some of the materials again on this larger structure, which, as you can see, to the left of the primary retail elements. And then in the back, we're suggesting the level of detail that we're going to see for the townhome portion of the development. Again, referring back to the specific elements in the guidelines, referencing the residential street frontage trees, the foundation plantings for all the buildings, shingled, sloped roofs, varied the roof heights. We've incorporated masonry, cementitious panels for durability, and we tried to vary the planes in both directions. So, you know, overall, we've taken care to avoid those long areas of uninterrupted planes, and I think that really is, I believe, successfully accomplished on this primary element here, and I think that's a handsome composition with some really fine materials that's going to present well from the primary street frontage. Again, entrances are all defined. We have raised the base as you prefer. We've included foundation plantings across all the buildings, and you know, again, have really referred back to the guidelines. A lot of this has been updated. The buildings and the uses of the buildings that are on the site have not really changed. The soul of this development is very much like it was very early presented. It's a neighborhood function, and that has just been really enhanced through now that we have the benefit of time and better understanding of who the tenants are and what the direction is for this space. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
I have one question just in regards to the one single larger building that you referenced. It looks like a 2-story building, but you said it would most likely be a 1-story building.
It is.
It would still look like this, but would just be, you wouldn't change the elevation.
It's a taller, it's required to be of a taller structure, so we felt like breaking it up to provide some clear story glazing in the upper area there would benefit that space.
Very nice. Other questions for Mr. Marr on this? Is it Marr or Mayor?
It's Marr, yeah.
Marr,
yeah.
okay, thank you. And do you address questions on the buffering too, or is that?
That would be Clyde, I think, would be
Okay.
better suited to talk about the buffering.
Any more questions on the changes to the facades and the building materials and any comments? Okay, thank you very much
Yeah.
for that presentation. Very nice, thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
And Mr. Roundtree, just a quick question.
Yes.
I think, if I'm remembering correctly, we were concerned about some of the buffering, mainly over around the townhome area and around the ponds and things, more to the rear of the property. Were there some changes made there or not?
Primarily, the change, Ms. Jones, was really, there's a private residence still in the back corner where the townhomes are, and we've put a type B buffer in there to make sure there was some buffering between that and the townhome units, and then along Whitecheck Lane, a type B buffer has been implemented as well. So those were really the primary concerns, and the other thing that was a little bit of a concern was whether the buffer between the rear of the retail buildings, the commercial buildings that were kind of the strip center between the stormwater area and the actual back of that retail. After talking with the planning staff, the buffer looks like it's best along that tightest circle versus there's a little contemplation about putting it between the stormwater pond and the back of the retail. But with the buffer being along tightest and you have the distance of the stormwater component, we feel like that'll be adequate as far as distance and opacity, basically, of the buffer to give a nice separation between the commercial and the residential.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the Planning Commission for Mr. Roundtree? Or any comments, concerns?
When you were talking about not you, but the other gentleman was talking about the two-story building, on the plan it says it's a three-story building. Is that the same building or is that a different building?
It's the same building.
So it's going to be a one-story building, not a three-story building?
One-story building with a two-story volume.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So would we need to have that marked correctly in the plan book just for future reference, or?
Yeah.
I think that reference is only on the prior approved site plan, so that was a reference sheet. So that's not the actual site plan for
Currently
this.
approved plan, it's right up there.
Right.
Amended.
So on the current site plan, it does
Okay,
not,
now, okay.
yeah, it doesn't
Okay.
any longer reference how many stories.
Didn't
Thank
see
you.
that little reference up there in the corner. Thank you. It's a lot to look at, but when you're ready. And I do like the townhomes, looks really nice.
So, I just want to make sure, I think I know the answer to this question, but, so page 18, front elevation is the same, quote-unquote, front elevation that is on page 20. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct. It's just a portion that zooms in on the potential Aldi,
Yeah.
but the full frontage of that building is on page 20.
Okay. Because I will say that page 18 makes it look a lot better than page 20, for whatever that's worth, so. As you can see, the, more of the design as part of the brick and above the brick, because there's several areas that are, I mean, there's no windows at all, or window facades, if that's the right term.
Void space
Yeah,
in lieu of windows.
correct. If there are no questions, I'll make a motion to, no base,
Yeah. I mean, it's not gateway, but
yeah.
I guess it's okay.
I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all very much for working with us on that and bringing back those changes. Thank you. Our next item of old business is a zoning application for approximately 1.01 acres located at 4431 Veterans Parkway to be zoned commercial highway simultaneous with annexation. Overall Creek Partners, Inc. is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you very much. The property owner is Mr. Vijay Patel, representing Overall Creek Partners. He submitted an application requesting to zone this property to commercial highway. It was simultaneous with an annexation request to annex into the city of Murfreesboro. The Planning Commission conducted the public hearing on August 7th, 2019 on both applications and deferred the zoning request to allow the applicant some additional time to prepare a conceptual site plan to help show how the property could develop commercially. This site plan was included in the attachments to the staff report, and an 11 by 17 exhibit is also provided to the Commission tonight. As depicted, the building is located towards the rear of the parking lot, and trash enclosure is in between the building and the street. And the conceptual plan demonstrates the challenges of this type of development on a parcel of this size and shape, and does not alleviate staff's original concerns. The property is currently developed with a single-family residence, and there's no commercial development proposed with this request. For this zoning application, the Planning Commission could recommend an alternative zoning district if they feel that there is one more appropriate for the property with the annexation that was requested. And when there is commercial development proposed in the future, they could come back and request an appropriate zoning to coincide at that time. As I indicated, the public hearing was conducted and closed on August 7th, and there is no new public hearing for this item. The Planning Commission can discuss the conceptual plan, the zoning request, and then make a recommendation, formulate that to the City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. So this conceptual plan that we're looking at, is it of this entire parcel that this 1.01 acres? Is that what we're seeing?
No, it's just the 1 acre parcel that's towards the top. The portion that's on the bottom is already a site plan that's been through site plan review and approval and is a different owner and developer. The applicant's representative had included this to show the interior potential for circulation and access. As I indicated last month, some of the staff's concerns are the multiple driveways, so many access points off of a busy street such as Veterans Parkway. Development of this small size of a parcel really does force the building towards the back of the property, and you have all the parking located in the front. And then if you have that happen to the 2 additional parcels to the front, to the north of that, you end up with this, really it's an older pattern of development that we commonly see on older highways like Northwest Broad or some of the other cities. So it's not really a cohesive development that we would prefer to see in this particular area.
So do you see this up here in this corner?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that for the
It's for the old.
adjoining property? That is not for this property that we're looking at.
Right, I think it's
All we're looking at is the top
the top 1 acre.
top lot,
You are correct.
95 by 70-foot building. And so, what did you say was is this the trash compactor that we're seeing that's kind of got the buffer around it with the X? I apologize, I'd have to put my glasses on to see that.
Yeah, it's illustrative, so it is as drawn. They
Oh, I
tried to
see.
maximize the
Yeah.
size of the building as much as they could, and in order to do that, that's why it's pushed all the way to the back, and that then forces your parking and your trash enclosure to be in front of the building, which is not something we would normally allow. So it actually kind of demonstrates what staff's concerns are. We would be concerned with something
Could you
coming
even
forward.
get a pickup on that trash? Could you get a truck that could circle around and pick that up?
They could.
You could?
Well, it'd be kind of tight, huh?
We're backing out.
It might be a third-party contractor.
I think it would be a third-party contractor. I don't think there's any question about it if it's a dumpster, but at the time that they'd be making the pickup, there's probably not going to be traffic in this parking lot as well, I'm assuming. So I don't see that as a huge problem. It backs up to the alleyway that goes across the project that it's adjacent to, so I'm not sure I'd want a dumpster in front of my business, but I guess if it's gated and surrounded properly, there's probably worse things you could have there. I think it does accomplish the fact that it's got the stub access point that goes to the other properties. If the other properties were to come in and ask for an access to the roadway, I think I would be opposed to that, because I think this gives them an access point without them going on to Veterans Parkway. In the event of an emergency, it gives you another access point in and out of the property, which I don't know if that's great or bad. It's great if there's an emergency. And I'm assuming that the traffic signalization is going to cause a break in the traffic, so I don't think I don't see it a whole lot worse than the right in, right out that's shown further down the road. I absolutely understand your concern with the access to Veterans Parkway and having too many access points onto Veterans Parkway, but I think this kind of accomplishes what the property owner's trying to develop, and it's truly, I think, kind of what we asked them to do at the last meeting, was to resolve that. And I think it may not be the ideal layout of how I would park a parking lot. I mean, especially the ones that are out there closer to Veterans Parkway, but it meets the criteria and gets them the parking spaces they need on the property. And with it being a lot of the shape that it is and where it's located, I'm not sure that there's without somebody buying a greater group of parcels and doing a larger project, I really don't see that there were a whole lot of options. I think the person was pretty creative and came up with a pretty decent plan for what we advised them at the last meeting.
I'll just weigh in on this too. I think, obviously I have great respect for Mr. Smotherman and his opinion on that. I probably have a little different perspective from the standpoint that that corner lot was an assemblage of multiple properties to create that site plan, and I know we talked, and there's been some effort made to connect these two to make the traffic flow. But I'm very conscientious of decisions that I make, and I want to make sure I'm consistent as much as I can be. And I think I would struggle with the two parcels to the north, one, in not providing road access, to those sites, but two, in thinking that it made sense to have all of those one after another backed up on veterans. And so, because of that and the recommendation of staff, I'm going to vote no on this, but just want to get that out.
I mean, I'm assuming that the applicant has gotten approval from the adjacent property owner to have this access. Is that an assumption we're making, or is that something that's been confirmed?
Good evening, Chair Jones and members of the commission. I'm Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel Engineering. To answer Mr. Halliburton's question, no, we are showing that just because we were encouraged to by staff. I don't, like Ms. Rush said, this site plan to the south has been through significant scrutiny, but I don't think it's gotten its final site plan approval. When you say subject to all staff comments, that's part of the process. So not sure if the staff has the stick or not to require that, but we're certainly allowing for it in our design. Let me address another couple things that have been said about this particular layout. Thankfully, my memory did serve me correctly at the last meeting, which sometimes isn't always the case. The access to the south on the southern property is further off this property line than you'd normally expect. So what that allowed us to do with this conceptual plan is to provide a new access for this property, and it's over 150 feet separation. I would not characterize this in any way like Broad Street. I'm pretty familiar with Northwest Broad Street and how traffic operations work out there. This is totally different. These are defined accesses, and we're able to provide good separation. One thing, when you're looking at 8.5 by 11, we're trying to show a lot of information on this small drawing. It's ends up a pretty big lot with a pretty big building on it. The trash enclosure has been mentioned a couple of times. That is well off Veterans Parkway. It's 150 feet or more off of Veterans Parkway, and what I've done there is allowed space to provide a good buffer where it'll be screened well from the parkway. Another thing I did was made that aisle width between those parking spaces wider than what you normally see. Normally we show 22 to 24 feet. We're showing somewhere between 28 and 30 feet here, so that trash truck shouldn't have a problem getting into the dumpster enclosure, and then when it leaves the dumpster enclosure, it'll back into that back out area that you see hatched in front of the building where parking spaces aren't as close to the building. They back into there and then pull on out towards Veterans Parkway. Be happy to answer any other questions you have at this time.
So, I'm not trying to be stupid, but back to my original question. So it sounds like the initial site plan has not been approved for the lot that were not necessarily, it's not the applicant's lot.
It's been approved by you, but I don't think it's been through the final staff process to get its building permit yet. I think they've been working towards that, but I don't think I've seen a final, yes, this is approved, you can build it from the city
And so
staff.
this access may not have been part of the original site plan, is that correct?
It's not a part of the original site plan, that's correct, but it'd be more of a question for Mr. Ives or Ms. Rush if they can still require this of that plan.
So it's gone through site plan review and approval, but it hasn't gotten building permits. And you're asking if this is a revised driveway? and if-
Are you able to, you want us to show connectivity, and we're showing it, are you able to require it of the property to the south?
Okay.
Do we know the answer to that question?
I do not. I've not been involved in
Okay.
that level of site plan review. I don't know.
I mean, from my perspective, that would have a weigh-in on my vote.
Can I take a
Yes,
stab at it?
please.
I would just tell you, I mean, if the site plan to the south, if that was not a condition of approval on that particular site plan, I don't know that we can retroactively
I'm
go
with
back and
you.
add a condition on. The applicant for that particular parcel would need to come back and make a request for a change. I believe that that's probably the process we would typically follow.
What we could do, if you want, is defer this another couple of weeks and talk to these people to the south, see if they're okay with it.
I guess we probably need to hear from the rest of the planning commission as to whether that would be needed or not.
Well, I guess from my view, if we don't get the connectivity, then it's pretty much a moot point from my standpoint, because that was the whole purpose of them going back and doing this. So if the answer is that they won't give us the connectivity, then I would vote no.
Let me make a motion that we defer this project till a later date.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Defer that again. Thanks very much. And we will move on to our public hearings. First item we have tonight is a zoning application for approximately 26.2 acres located along Cherry Lane to be rezoned from RS15 to P. City of Murfreesboro is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones and Planning Commission. Our first public hearing this evening is for property that's located south of Cherry Lane. The property is located east of Leanna Road and is on property that's currently owned by the city. It is a smaller portion of a larger tract of property. It's the area shown in purple on the map is the smaller portion of that larger tract. It is 26.2 acres and currently zoned RS15 in that single-family residential district that allows single-family detached homes with 15,000 square foot lots to be developed on the property. This property is currently being utilized for recreational purposes. The smaller portion and the larger portion is being utilized by the Murfreesboro Water Resources Department. Since the property is being acquired by our Parks and Rec Department, staff suggested they pursue a zoning change to P, which stands for Park, to allow the uses by right. It made sense to staff that if this were going to be used as public open space or public formalized recreation area, that the zoning entitlement allow it by right. If it were not rezoned to Park, they would be required to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit. And although that is a very effective process, it's more suited for areas where you don't expect this sort of use. This is very established recreational use, and it's something that we've been anticipating. I think City Council's been planning for and funding for as well. There are some bigger improvements going on the Siegel Soccer Park that's just to the east, and you can see the P zoning there on the map that I have before you. And because of those changes, there are some smaller changes that are going to happen on this property. Cherry Lane, of course, is on our major transportation plan, and there's some improvements being made to that and some realignment as well. And we mentioned that, I think, previously. That realignment will bring Cherry Lane a little further to the south and probably shorten the length of that drive. The Murfreesboro Future Land Use Map recommends that this area be utilized for suburban residential uses. The proposed zone of Park doesn't fit within the suburban residential uses. However, Chapter 6 of our plan, our comprehensive plan, highly emphasizes various forms of recreational space, from pocket parks to regional parks, and very specific parks like this. So although this isn't a zoning that's recommended in the land use map, it is certainly anticipated to be in our city, and it also upholds our principles of providing those sorts of not only economic development but recreational opportunities. The Chamber of Commerce has trademarked Rutherford County our sports capital of Tennessee, and we think that this zoning will help support that as well. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing prior to making a recommendation to City Council. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. We also have representatives of the Parks and Rec Department here this evening as well, if you have any questions from them.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Green.
You're welcome.
Any questions before we open the public hearing? All right, we have 6 public hearings tonight. So for any public hearing, we will invite you when we open the public hearing to come forward to the podium to state your name and your address, and then make any comments you have about that particular application. Please make your comments directly to the Planning Commission and not to other members of the audience or the developers. Just make your comments to the Planning Commission. We will make note of any questions that you ask during your comments, and we will try to address all of those at the end of the public hearing. We also ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, since we do have a lot of people here tonight that look like they would like to speak. So we will go ahead and open our first public hearing on this Cherry Lane rezoning to P Park. Anybody that would like to speak on this item, please come forward to the podium, state your name and address. No takers for the first item. All right, we will close that public hearing and ask for any further comments from staff. or any of the Planning Commission? And if not, we'll be ready for a motion.
I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our second public hearing tonight is an annexation petition and plan of services for approximately 10.6 acres located along Asbury Lane and Asbury Road. Pretoria Rentals Trust is the applicant. Ms. Green will give us some information about that. Before we start into this item, I would like to state that I will abstain from this particular item and the next item, which will be the zoning application for this same property, as I have a, Mr. Wisniewski and I have a family interest. My son's married to his daughter, and so I will abstain from anything to do with these two applications. I will still conduct the meeting. I just will not comment, and I will not vote. So with that being said, we will go ahead and take our initial comments from Ms. Green.
Thank you. This next item is to consider the adoption of plan of services and a feasibility study for property located along Asbury Lane and Asbury Road. Asbury Lane is, of course, the street that runs north-south, and Asbury Road runs along the northern border of the property. It does consist of two parcels that are just over 5 acres and portions of right-of-way of Asbury Lane and Asbury Road. The area being studied for annexation is shown in purple on the map that you have before you. You can see current city limits are shaded gray, and the areas that are white are in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County. So this property is contiguous with city limits on the eastern boundary of Asbury Road. The property is currently zoned for medium-density residential purposes in the county. I've prepared a plan of services for you and included in the packet that outline the services the city will be able to provide and a time frame for when we can provide those. It appears the city has services available. Sewer is along the creek, which runs along the western property, and you can see it's the winding property line there. And we have we can provide solid waste service, fire protection, and then of course electric will require some reworking, but we can provide that as well. The annexation is this public hearing. After I finish speaking, you'll open the public hearing and we'll invite folks to come and speak regarding the annexation. After this public hearing, there'll be another one to talk about the zoning. So I know that there's probably people interested in talking about the annexation of the property, and we welcome that at this time. But I'll give another presentation for the zoning. And so if there are specific comments about the zoning, we ask for those to be made during the zoning public hearing so that they can be addressed. This is regarding the annexation of the two properties and the right-of-way. I did want to point out that the Rutherford County Road Board did approve our request to annex the right-of-way Tuesday morning, and we did get signatures from them as well as a neighborhood meeting being held for the annexation and zoning. That was held on August 26th at the Blackman Community Club, and there were probably about 30 people in attendance at that meeting. If you have any questions about the annexation, I'll be happy to answer them either before or after the public hearing. And we do have representatives of the zoning change in the audience today. We have a petition for annexation from the property owners, but I don't believe they're here tonight. But Mr. Wisniewski and his design team are here for questions regarding the zoning change.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
You're welcome.
So this is the hearing in regards to the annexation petition and plan of services. Any questions from the Planning Commission before we open that public hearing?
Ms. Green, the annexation's the obvious one. They want to come into the city, and questions whether or not we should permit that. The plan of services, obviously sewer, electric, those type of things are included in that. Is a safe way in and out of the neighborhood when you're talking about the roadways and stuff, is that part of the plan of services, or is this, I mean, does the plan of services ensure that we can guarantee that you've got a safe way in and out of this neighborhood?
I think if we considered it, or the county considered it not safe, we probably would stop access currently as it is. But the annexation reviews the property for as it exists today with 2 single-family homes, and we believe that the annexation of the property will not change that, whether it's in the city or not. The transportation doesn't change. The need for transportation improvements, we believe, would be triggered by a redevelopment, okay. So to increase the density, which would come later.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak regarding the annexation petition and plan of services.
I believe I'm up first. My name is Kitty McConnell. I am the property owner and the resident at 3818 Asbury Road, next door to the proposed Pretoria Falls. I have these specific concerns. The floodplain. Landmark's development plan includes 6 homes on the western side of these properties in the floodplain of Overall Creek. They plan to raise or build up some of this ground, and I have serious concerns. The city and/or county needs to reevaluate Overall Creek's floodplain levels and floodway. Overall Creek flooded over 12 feet in February this year, reaching well up onto my property. It flooded at least 10 feet once in 2018 and twice the year before that. I can show you where if somebody needs to come out. Overall Creek behaves much differently now that the acres of woodlands and the watershed above the creek that used to soak up rainfall, they are gone now. The riparian zones are still there, and I appreciate that. Water is a tremendous force. This artificial elevation that Landmark plans will probably wash out. Eddying will undercut and wash out my land and possibly slump onto my property. Those are my concerns. Upstream also, that elevation could partially dam the creek, flooding homes on Dixie Lane and Spring Creek that are currently above or in less danger. The water mains of my property and the property north of me, 3858 Asbury Road, have our water mains on the corner of Asbury Lane and Asbury Road. We need the city to either relocate both of these water mains, or if the development's HOA would maintain our easement. Trees on my fence line. My fence is dependent on the trees growing along the border between these 2 properties, mine and the Pretoria Falls. I ask that any living tree that is within 1 foot of the fence be left standing and unharmed, its roots and branches untouched, and the base not covered by or deprived of any soil. Water flow from the development onto my property. Rainfall currently flows from the developer's site onto my property along its eastern edge. It collects into a small vale on my property and enters into Overall Creek. This water flow needs to continue to occur in this location where there is no damage to my property. And it needs to continue to occur over this spread of approximately 30 feet as it does now. Heat. The ambient temperature of Asbury Park will rise with the absence of the tall trees in this development. I would ask if you could encourage Landmark to use light-colored roofing. I did that on my house in Laverne. It made a great deal of difference. A dark roof creates an updraft in winter, and in summer it simply increases the ambient heat. Traffic is my last concern. The intersection of Horde Road and Old Nashville Highway, being so close to the bridge over 840, has almost zero line of sight from that direction. Many more cars will need to exit there in the future. If I ask if you could increase perhaps reflector strips on the bridge and signage warning of this intersection, are there any other actions that you would be able to take? I'm not an expert in this area. The intersection of Asbury Road and Old Nashville Highway has a limited line of sight, oftentimes due to the brush that develops there. Also, can that road sign be moved closer to Old Nashville Highway so that its visibility is greater from traffic on Old Nashville Highway? And can intersection signs be added from both directions on Old Nashville Highway? The intersection of Asbury Lane onto Medical Center is already well established as a poor connection, especially if one is exiting to the left. Please make a change that would save lives and reduce the traffic flow problem from Asbury Park. I have 3 suggestions. If you could rework the timing of the lights at Convention Center Boulevard to give people leaving and entering Asbury Lane more opportunity to turn. Or if you could add a traffic plate trigger on Asbury Lane and perhaps a recessed light on the westbound side of Medical Center. An example would be the light that on Bell Road in Nashville as you go west before you reach I-24. Or since Asbury Lane is already S-curved before meeting Medical Center, is it possible to extend the lane a few feet and create an intersection there? Thank you so much for hearing my concerns.
Thank you, Ms. McConnell.
Do I answer questions, or do I sit down?
No, ma'am, you can sit down.
Thank you.
And I'll just remind everybody that we would like to hear your comments at this public hearing regarding the annexation of the property. And Ms. McConnell, you'll certainly be able to come speak again when we talk at the next public hearing about the actual zoning of the property, which is Landmark Homes' request. Right now, this is a hearing from the property owners to annex their property into the city. And so that's what we would like to hear from you now about, is whether or not you consider, any concerns you have about this property being annexed into the city. Thank you.
Chris Brandon, I'm her husband, same address. I guess I have one big question about the annexation. Is there not liability on the corner of Asbury Medical? And if you're annexing the property, knowing that it's going to be developed possibly in the future, would that not be accepting liability as well, knowing what's about to happen? Well, why would you want to annex a current problem? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak about the annexation?
Yes, I am Doug Hayes. I have lived on Asbury Road all my life. I purchased the home for my mother and currently raising my kids in the same home that I was raised in. The area has a great deal of value to me. I've learned more about civic duties in these past couple weeks than I've ever thought I would ever know. And I want to quickly give my appreciation to some of the people in this room that have helped me and guided me through the process of how to best navigate this. Ronnie, Donald, Eddie, yourself, thank you very much. I have sent a report of my thoughts on this matter to everybody, I think, in this room, or at least I tried to. If not, it's available. Just get with me and I'll be glad. It's going to do a much better job of outlining my concerns than I'm going to do nervously talking in front of all of you guys tonight. Our area has already seen a massive explosion of growth recently. The Kingsbury project and the Spring Creek project in particular, those aren't even done yet. In particular, Kingsbury, they don't even have a house up yet. So when we hear these traffic concerns, which are very real, it hasn't even begun yet because people haven't even moved in here yet. So once these developments are fully occupied, we're going to have an existing problem just be absolutely blown up. And so I know that this is about the annexation, but it kind of ties in with the zoning, and I don't really know how to untie those two because I know that without the annexation, the zoning doesn't even become. So I might come here and talk again, but because of the explosion of growth and the already existing problem, when we talk about doing a high-density development, that is exactly what they're proposing. This is high density. There's no acreage. There's 0 lot lines. If you look at the plan, they are packing as many houses as they possibly can on this parcel of land. I want to make it very clear that I am not against growth. I am not against new neighbors. I'm not against developers. I just want growth that is sustainable, that fits within our community, and more importantly, our infrastructure. You're probably going to hear from other people about the Medical Center Parkway issue. It is a very awkward intersection. Obviously there's no light. I don't think there can be a light. It's dangerous. I, on a weekly basis, almost getting a wreck, have close calls. It is a very common sight to see emergency vehicles and people getting wheeled in the back of ambulances and wrecks and fender benders and everything else. People have to make a call to go or not. There's a right-of-way confusion. I think there are some proposals on the board on future, like 2035, 2040, on ways to correct this. But I think when we're talking about annexation, it's, we're putting the cart before the horse. And I would plead with the decision makers in this room that, I have a lot of personal nostalgia and feeling in this, and I'm not asking you to think about that. When I got that letter in the mail, my heart sunk. I knew what was coming. I knew that the burden of construction, the bulldozers, the blasting, the rock drilling, I knew it was never going to end.
Watch your 3 minutes.
Absolutely, I'll wrap it up right now.
It's at about
But
5 or 6 right now.
aside from my own personal feelings, there's a public issue at stake here, and that is, are we going to be able to sustain this kind of high-density development? So, again, if you annex this, this is what's probably going to happen, is this high density. I will come up here later and talk about if this was to be annexed, what kind of zoning is proper. But for right now, I want you guys as the decision makers to think about, are we capable of taking this on without risking public safety? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Anybody else speak on the annexation?
My name is Sonette Myberg, and we are the owners of the property there. And we purchased the property sometime a few years ago with the plan on doing a development over there. And we've decided to move on and hand it over to Landmark so that they can continue the moving there. And I just want to basically mention also, medical center is a problem, and I'm not sure how that ties into Asbury. Asbury's traffic and Horde Lane and all of that already exists. It's medical center that I feel is more a problem than what Asbury Lane is. And that's why we would like to have this annexed into the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on the annexation?
My name is Richard Silk. I'm formerly of Asbury Lane, currently of Scotland off Greenland. I had a piece of property on Asbury Lane that had the privilege of being deemed within FEMA's hazard floodplain, 500-year floodplain. Only a strip of the fence was actually above the floodplain. And I had also the privilege or pleasure of trying to build a home on that location. I feel that it's important to understand how FEMA operates with a floodplain. If you own, say, 2 acres of land, you can borrow or dig a pit from one portion of those 2 acres in order to build up a pad above the floodplain that you can build upon, in which case you have normal building codes. However, if you try to build directly in the floodplain, you have to create an approved structure through which the water can flow in the event of a flood, and you have to base your lowest point of your building 6 feet above the floodplain. So my biggest question here is, where is FEMA involved in this process? Have the FEMA maps been consulted for the floodplain? What are the legal, financial obligations of trying to violate FEMA's regulations? I think those are very important issues that have to be looked at. If someone owns that entire parcel that they have outlined in the pink, then the builder may dig a pit from one zone in order to raise elevation in the building zone, because the amount of water that's flowing through cannot be affected. In other words, you cannot import fill dirt to a floodplain. You can't just bring in dirt and build up, because you're going to flood out whoever's downstream and upstream. So in zoning, any kind of an application for zoning, my question, or directive, if you will, to the council is, please make sure that you have your FEMA floodplain zone maps looked at and considered during your voting process. Thank you.
Mr. Silk. Anybody else to speak on the annexation? Okay, we will close the public hearing on the annexation petition and plan of services. Had a few questions in there, Ms. Green, and then we'll take comments.
Sure.
From the Planning Commission.
I took note of a few, and if I missed some, please let me know. I know that there were quite a few questions about FEMA and about stormwater. And the city of Murfreesboro does participate in FEMA's flood insurance program. To participate, FEMA gives you a set of rules that you have to abide by, and we have those adopted by ordinance in the zoning ordinance. And they're clearly defined and laid out, and we have several waterways in our community, and we're not unfamiliar with development at, near, or adjacent to bodies of water. So there are various types of areas. There's a floodway where no development can happen at all, and that's where you expect water to flow. There's an area that FEMA has identified as the 100-year floodplain, which means there's a 1% chance each year that water will reach a specified elevation. And this area has been mapped by FEMA and is routinely reviewed and updated. And they have identified what that 100-year elevation is. And so our ordinance requires development to abide by FEMA's rules. And the fact that the city of Murfreesboro participates in the program means that people who own property that is affected by a waterway can get insurance through the federal government, through FEMA. If we did not, then they wouldn't have that opportunity. So they do have that opportunity to get insurance through FEMA for flooding. There are various stages of flooding that you may be familiar with, but FEMA regulates to the 100-year floodway, and that's where insurance is mandatory. This site, of course, has the floodway and floodplain on it. Like I said, nothing can happen in the floodway. The floodplain is regulated by that ordinance that we adopted, that basically FEMA gave us the language, and we actually get audited by FEMA. They come into our community, we provide them an office space, and they go through all of our building permits and look for and have a keen eye for finding problems, whether they are something that was constructed 60 years ago. Most of our new construction, we don't really see problems come up, but we have some older stuff in older parts of our town near Bridge Avenue where there's like a house that does routinely have a claim, but any new development, we require them to abide by those. And there is fill that's required, so you bring the land up to a certain level. That is FEMA, which is a separate matter to water quality, and I know that some people are concerned, and as I am, with the quality of water in our community, because that water is what we drink, of course. And so we have regulations about the quality of water that goes back into the creek when it's runoff. So we have stormwater regulations. Essentially, and this is a very simple way to explain it, but you can't put more water off on your neighbors than you currently do. The land is currently, does have some impervious area with driveways and rooftops. It currently receives, retains, and releases water at a specified rate. Any development could not go beyond that rate, so they could not increase the discharge of water any faster. So the speed of water off this property, either into drainage ditches or into the river, have to be maintained. They can't put more off on their neighbors than they did before. They also have to treat the quality of water, so there's the quantity of water, or the amount of water, and the quality of water. And it's our belief that Mother Nature does a fabulous job of treating rainwater and stormwater. So oftentimes you'll see what I think are more gentler approaches to managing water, bio-retention swales or areas of ditches where water can filter through the soil before going to the creek, because you want to give it an opportunity to settle for that mud and dirt that some people reference, to settle. This development, when it happens, will have to comply with our stormwater regulations, and we have people in our water and sewer department and in our development services department that will review those. There are calculations that are submitted, there's stormwater plans, and the developer will be required to submit a plan, and this project will come back, of course, to Planning Commission for site plan review and approval if there were any change. As it stands now in the annexation with these two properties, we don't think that the annexation of this property won't change anything physically. Of course, the redevelopment probably will, and I think we talked about that just a little bit earlier. And somebody asked why we would want to annex the right-of-way of Asbury Lane and Asbury Road, and the city would like to have the right-of-way, particularly that's in front of this property, within its jurisdiction so that we can review it. If there are any modifications that need to happen to the road, that they would have to come to the Planning Commission to get those. With redevelopment, we anticipate roadway, if the road is substandard, that they do roadway improvements to accommodate that, and maybe even additional roadway improvements to improve the area. So the intersection in this area, we believe, would be best suited to be in the city of Murfreesboro so that we can regulate it. There are also, of course, some improvements that are gone on here with some sewer line changes, and the city actually has an agreement already to do some maintenance in this area, so we thought that that would be the best choice. I know that there were some requests to do some work further down Asbury Road toward some much further down the road. It's not in the city. Relocating signs, cutting brush, anything like that, we would not do because it's not within our jurisdiction. If those comments were made here and this were annexed in the city, then it would be something that we would look at, our Public Works Department would look at. But because it is at an intersection, it's not even close to being within the city limits, those type comments should go to Rutherford County. They have a Public Works Department as well. And sometimes those changes can be done by the Highway Department. So I think just reach out to them and see what they can do there. The city would not be able to do anything because those roads aren't in the city limits. Let's see. I think there were some development-specific comments, of course, and certainly any changes in the utility, if they affected a neighbor, the utilities will require that those neighbors still have their water mains. I think somebody said if something were going to change, that they need to make sure that they still have water, and CUD and Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department both would make sure that that's something that happened. Were there anything else that you want me to go over regarding the annexation?
Ms. McConnell brought up some suggestions, and maybe these, Mr. Huddleston might want to address that. She talked about if there was a way to make any lane changes with respects to Asbury into Medical Center Parkway. One of the comments she mentioned was the light changing difference, if in fact that would make any difference as to folks being able to exit from Asbury onto Medical Center Parkway.
She talked about the signal timing.
Yes.
Good evening, Plain Commission members. Mr. Halliburton, what I will provide you is just a quick update. We have requested a proposal from a traffic consulting firm, and we are doing with that proposal, we'll conduct an operational analysis of the intersection of Asbury and Medical Center Parkway. As we all know, that's a tough intersection located between two signalized intersections, the interstate on-ramps and then Conference Center Boulevard. The importance of allowing traffic to exit on and off of the interstate at that interchange drives a lot of the decisions we make there. Allowing that traffic to back up onto the interstate causes significant problems, including potential accidents and loss of one of the 4 lanes coming through Murfreesboro. So that's our critical movement is allowing that traffic to exit. But with that study, we would look at opportunities where we could enhance the ability to enter and exit Asbury onto Med Center. I think the challenging turns there are going to be the left turns in and the left turn out, and the left turn out obviously is the last turn out to get served, and that's so the people who are using Asbury to turn left on Med Center, that's a very tough turn, but we'll with that operational analysis look at any opportunities we've got to maybe enhance that. I do know that we made some striping changes out there to help clarify and designate approach lanes in that intersection. We also moved the turning lane approach to Asbury over so that you've got better visibility of the oncoming traffic on Med Center. We've already made some operational changes, but we'll look to do more with the recommendations of that study. Obviously, we don't have the recommendations at this time to consider at this meeting, but I just would update you on that.
Do you have a time frame as to when that study will be completed?
A study on that's probably 3 to 6 months for us to for them to collect the data. We'd need current traffic counts, and we want those traffic counts obviously with school in session. Both MTSU and Rutherford County and Murfreesboro City schools are in session, so this is a good time to count that area. It takes us, it would take them, once the study's approved, a few days to actually collect that traffic count and then actually analyze that would take a few weeks and then to make recommendations from the study. So I would expect 3 to 6 months we'd have some recommendations there. The second issue with those recommendations then becomes implementation and funding. And so minor improvements are fairly easy to manage out of our current budget. As the members of our City Council know, that we are always prioritizing capital projects, and so a major improvement there would be in line for capital funding, and so that would be likely a several year out before we could secure that funding and actually make the improvements.
Thank you.
If it were not for the next item that we're going to entertain, would this property be zoned RS-12 as it would come into the city?
It would come into the city with an interim zoning of RS-15.
RS-15. But we probably wouldn't think that that would be a good idea to bring in 2 residential properties, RS-15, that's going to require this much road infrastructure improvement. Is that a pretty safe assumption?
We may bring it in, but I imagine developers wouldn't consider redeveloping it because the costs would outweigh any benefits.
So the only way this roadway can be improved is really the increase of density, but the increase of density actually exacerbates the problem that we already currently have.
No, sir. Any other comments, questions from the Planning Commission?
If there are no further comments, I'll make a motion to approve the annexation plan of services, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And 1 abstention. All right. We will move on to the next item, which is the zoning application for approximately 10.6 acres located along Asbury Lane and Asbury Road to be zoned PRD, Pretoria Falls PRD, simultaneous with annexation. Landmark Homes of Tennessee is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you, ma'am. As promised, this is the second public hearing for a property which you just considered. You just considered it for annexation, for which there was a petition, and there is a companion zoning change request by Landmark Homes of Tennessee to change the property to PRD, Planned Residential District, simultaneous with annexation. As I may have mentioned before, the property is currently zoned RM in the county, which is medium density residential district, which generally has lot sizes between 15 and 20,000 square feet, which largely depends on the need for septic fields. Of course, the city has sanitary sewer available, so that's not a type of treatment that we will utilize. The area of requesting the zoning change consists of 2 parcels that are just over 5 acres each, and they are located south of Asbury Road and west of Asbury Lane, as shown on the map before you. The areas directly contiguous with this property are in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County. Of course, Overall Creek and its floodway run along the western boundary. You can see to the south a little portion of a PRD, Planned Residential District zoning, that currently exists, and that's the Spring Creek development that's currently in the city and under development. Spring Creek is a developing 90-unit townhome and 48-lot single-family subdivision, so that development itself has 1.9 dwelling units per acre. A large reason why the property has a lower density is because quite a significant amount of property has the floodway and floodplain actually going through it, not just along the edge. So they've clustered the development of the townhomes in the small lot single family closer to Asbury Lane and to the north. You can see on the map, if you look just across Asbury Lane, a larger, almost rectangle shape that's shown as PRD, and it has roads in it that are Madrid, Agatha, and Philippe Way. That is the Kingsbury plan development, which has an entitlement to be developed, although there are no houses there yet. I believe they've started some preliminary work. The Kingsbury consists of 156 single-family detached small lots. It has a density of 4.4 dwelling units per acre. So those are the two city developments that are very close to the property. And what you see in the other areas are mostly exurban, suburban type development that we typically see in the county. The proposed PRD is for a development that is being called Pretoria Falls, and I think it's an homage to the current property owner who has some tie back to South Africa. So they felt very strongly that it'd keep that name. The plan shows 60 single-family detached homes on the 10.6 acres, and that's a density of approximately 5.7 dwelling units per acre. These homes are single-family detached homes and will have a horizontal property regime form of ownership, so an ownership similar to condominiums, but they'll be single-family detached structures. And this is a very similar setup to Tuscany, which is on North Thompson Lane. The same developer built those type homes there, and he believes that they've been successful. I've previously mentioned that this book says that the development's age targeted, but it is not age restricted, so it would be open to all types of families. The developer and staff attended a neighborhood meeting, I think I referenced in the previous public hearing, on August 26th. It was at the Blackman Community Center, and it was well attended. There, and of course, the road board considered the right-of-way that's considering to be annexed here. During the workshop, Planning Commission noted that some of the recreation areas seem to be lacking, that if there were a give and allowance for extra density, that they needed to show some more formalized recreation areas, and I think they'll want to speak to that and tell you what they've done for those changes, but I just wanted to bring that back up because I know it was something that you discussed at length. The project would be served by Murfreesboro Solid Waste Department if it were to be approved, and we did ensure that the developer knows that the roads would all have to meet the design criteria in our subdivision regulations, because the solid waste vehicle and our fire trucks will need to be able to safely and easily maneuver the site. You can see that the proposed plan has an access point onto Asbury Lane and to Asbury Road. If this development's approved, there would be improvements required to both Asbury Lane and Asbury Road to accommodate the additional dwelling units that would be resulting from this redevelopment. And so that will likely include turn lanes and widening and right-of-way dedication for both areas. Staff was concerned, of course, with the backs of homes facing the right-of-way, because that's something that we don't allow. So where you see the back of the home facing a road, there's actually a landscape berm in that area, in addition to landscaping to help screen the backs of the homes. There's also the major transportation plan shows some improvements or connection from Asbury Road, and that plan is more of a bird's eye view, an idea of where we want roads to go, but we wanted to make sure that this developer was accommodating it and not putting any hindrances in the way of any future roadway improvements there. So they have committed to dedicating any necessary right-of-way that the city may need, and also reserve space in the pinch point of the property for a potential future road to go through that area. The plan development process allows the developer to request exceptions to our standards. They've identified 3 types of exceptions. The first is that single-family detached homes require 4 parking spaces outside of the garage, so driveways need to accommodate 4 spaces, and they're requesting to only accommodate 2 parking spaces in the driveway, but count the garages as part of their required parking. And they would want to put restrictions in the plan development and in the HOA that restrict the use of those garages for storage, that they have to be utilized for parking. And so that's one of the exceptions. I did mention to them and reiterate today that I'm still not convinced that their smaller garage size can actually accommodate 2 vehicles easily. They've submitted some photos, which I think we discussed today, in turn kind of proved my point that the 19 by 19 garage is not large enough. If they are using the garage as part of the required parking, we want to make sure that they comfortably fit 2 cars, and also the garbage, solid waste cart that's required in the garage, and also the other types of utilities like hot water heaters. And I've got some photos in the packet that they submitted for their garage sizes. And so we would like confirmation from you that you agree with us that the size of the parking is important. And I think it's something that during site plan review, since this will come back to you, we can work through the details of that size of the garage. But I certainly know, looking at our history, that something like 19 by 19 is much too small, considering what we have approved before and the expectations for these spaces, although I know that they want that to be the smallest size. I think we can work out those details later, but I don't want to set the expectation up that we would allow something that couldn't accommodate all the types of vehicles and utilities we see there. The second exception, which is typical for planned developments, are exceptions to the bulk standards in our zoning ordinance, so the setbacks and for the lot coverage and those sorts of things. I did outline the setbacks they are requesting. They're proposing to have a 20-foot setback to the face of the garage. The house can be 13 feet to the front, behind the sidewalk. So that means that the garages could be recessed back behind the front of the house, which is a look we typically like. And then there are some secondary front corner lots that they're asking for 4 feet from the sidewalk, which is rather close. They're proposing to have 10 feet between structures because, remember, there are no property lines between structures. The property lines run along the walls. And so the separation would be 10 feet between structures, which I would estimate would be about a 5-foot side setback then if you were going to have a line between the two of them, and 10-foot rear setback. The future land use map does recommend suburban residential character for the subject property. This property is single-family detached, which fits within that category of suburban residential. However, the density seems to be a little bit more than recommended. The suburban residential character typically says 2 to 3.5 dwelling units per acre, and it encourages cluster development with more open space. The design team does have a presentation on this PRD that they'd like to present to you tonight, and I believe the applicant would like to speak to you as well. You should conduct a public hearing prior to making any recommendations to City Council, and of course I'm available for any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. All right, do you want to make a presentation? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, trying to get to the home screen. Oh, good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Dunn. I'm a land planner and landscape architect with CSDG in Nashville, Tennessee, 2305 Klein Avenue. I'm here this evening to speak on behalf of the applicant, the Landmark Homes of Tennessee. I apologize, I'm having some technical difficulty here. How do we get to the actual presentation? I apologize.
No.
Let's see.
It's the PDF.
It's the PDF, okay, gotcha.
Oh, here we go.
There you go.
I assure you I'm a better planner and landscape architect than I am technical with the computers here.
No problem.
But I very much appreciate y'all's time to speak this evening. And in respect of y'all's time, I want to try to be as brief as possible while also covering the main points, and also give you all a insight into the specific process that we utilize in the planning and the site planning for this in particular project. Ms. Green did an amazing job highlighting the main points, so I don't want to hit too much on what she said, but did want to just again go over the main points. So with this site, we look at both a regional context as well as a local context. How does this site fit regionally as well as locally? So we looked at the site's proximity to Nashville, Tennessee, which is approximately 33 miles from downtown Nashville. We also looked at the site's proximity to downtown Murfreesboro, which is approximately 14 miles. And in addition, from a transportation standpoint, we looked at the local roadways, which are Asbury Lane and Asbury Road. This is currently on that intersection. And both of those roads are being shown as residential collector streets. I'm sorry, residential collector roads. And in addition to the 2040 major transportation plan, we see here that Asbury Road's plan right now is to come through the site in the southern quadrant, cutting right through this sliver here for future connectivity from Asbury Road to Manson Pike down in this location here. So we wanted to make sure that we were addressing that in our site planning process as well. In addition, we looked at the Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Land Use Plan and how this site, which is down in this little area here, how was it adhering to the local land use policy on adjacent land uses. And we find, as Ms. Green pointed out, that this is in the suburban residential land use policy district, but we also see that it abuts the business park land use policy district. So we wanted to be cognizant of that and also make sure that we were addressing that future business district to make sure that we were providing potential working staff that might be able to service that business park district and be more cohesive than just the suburban residential piece that we see here. We also see some little slivers. This is a multifamily land use district, and we also see some mixed use land use districts near this location. So we wanted to make sure that we were addressing the greater policy, not just what that policy was on the site. We also looked at the zoning map and what the current zoning is adjacent to the site. As Ms. Green alluded to, a lot of that is RM, residential medium density within Rutherford County. So we also want to be cognizant of those items too, so that it's not out of place with the current character. We also looked at utilities, making sure that we had adequate utilities on the site, and as Ms. Green alluded to, we do have water, sewer, electrical, and gas that would be able to service this development. So now that we've looked at the big picture, we begin to zone in on the site itself. The site itself is 10.6 acres, and we see the existing conditions are there's 2 single-family residential homes, one located here, one located here. There's also gravel drives that then bleed into more of a paved surface, right, and as somewhat of a parking mechanism for those homes. And then the majority of the site here is somewhat wooded, but more gentle sloping. As you get further to the west, near the creek, it begins to get a little bit more dense with vegetation. And then we have some more steady slopes as we fall into the creek area. So then we take those existing conditions, and this is part of our very specific planning process. We take those existing conditions and we begin to analyze them. We begin to say, okay, where would development be better suited on the site? Where could potential access points be? Where would be some nice views and vistas on the site? And we found, it's very difficult maybe to see on the screen here, but this area that's denoted in pink was perfectly primed for development in that the slopes are relatively gentle and the vegetation was not as dense in some of those locations. We also saw some potential areas for detention and maybe even an amenity area right here that would be centrally located, as well as handling the detention within near Overall Creek. From a access standpoint, we saw that there would be potentially great access onto Asbury Road in this location and potential access along Asbury Lane in this location. There has also been talk, and again, I don't believe anything's been finalized whatsoever, but in lieu of bringing that Asbury Road down through this property and then coming into this location, there had been talks with the city that suggested future roadway connection may occur more in this location. But that's just in conversations that we've had with the city thus far. So I don't want to tell you that's exactly what's happening. Again, this is all part of the major thoroughfare plan to have that road come through this property, and you'll see in a moment that we have allocated room for that road to come through. So from an analysis standpoint, then we begin to generate the illustrative master plan. What can be achieved on this site? And from what we saw, we believe that 60 single-family detached units would fit very nicely on this property. Now, what you might have difficulty seeing, and I wanted to point out, is this site is 10.6 acres. Of that 10.6 acres, 5.4 acres is being kept as open space. That would be owned by the entire HOA. So that's 51% of the site would be green space. So I did want to make mention of that. Within that green space, you would have some recreational areas, maybe some more passive elements around this Pretoria Pond, which these homes all back up to. You would have some additional open space areas, maybe some sitting areas, maybe some picnic areas. We want to work very closely with the city to help us define maybe what those elements can be. We envision that there would be a playground associated with the overlook here onto Overall Creek. We think that view, maintaining that view and maintaining this as more of a play area would be fantastic. In addition, we wanted to incorporate a dog park. We're seeing that many developments we're working on are incorporating a lot of dog parks because most of the owners have animals, so we want to accommodate that. The main goal here is to get people to be outside. So often people go home, they turn on Netflix, and in lieu of that, we want people to go home and talk to their neighbors. We want sidewalks on both sides of the street so they could have that walkability. We want to have those open, passive, and recreational elements for the neighbors to enjoy. And in addition, from a parking standpoint, we want to have some overflow parking. So we've accommodated some overflow parking in certain points of the development. From a streetscape standpoint, we would have one shade tree for every 2 homes. So when you're driving through this neighborhood, it's very nicely, there's a lot of continuity between the architecture of the homes and the landscape architecture of the streetscape. And I'll get to the homes here in a minute. But we want it to feel very much at home and people have a sense of place and belonging while still utilizing some of the open areas that we've offered. Again, it's very difficult to see on this from this scale, but there's a lot of open space. Half of the site would be open space here. Also, there would be a mail kiosk located in this general vicinity. In addition, we've worked very closely with the planning staff to determine what those buffer yards need to be. We had a neighborhood meeting recently, and some great comments were brought up about preserving existing vegetation along the boundaries, and we want to do all we can to preserve as much existing vegetation along the boundaries as possible. In addition, along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane, maintaining as much vegetation as we can, in addition to incorporating some berming and vegetation from a noise standpoint as well as from a visual standpoint, and maybe meandering that berm around existing vegetation where need be. And we want to be working very closely with the planning staff in order to determine how best to accomplish that task. We also want to make sure that we're adhering to the right-of-way dedication and the turning lanes that would be required along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane. This site we envision would be 2 phases. We envision phase 1 being about 34 homes and phase 2 being about 26 homes. Phase 1 being this whole piece here, phase 2 being this piece here. We envision the character of the site. We want it to be a lot of natural elements. We want the materials to be unified. So what we're envisioning from the signage and from the material selection is a lot of natural stone, a lot of wood. The sitting areas to have this trellis and this bench be a very natural feeling, not a lot of hard materials. The mail kiosk would have maybe a stone column and some nice wood arbor that would go over it. Again, returning people to nature, making sure people are outside and enjoying the community that they're living in and not confined to the inside of their homes. Now, the homes themselves, we envision those being a mix of brick, stone, and hardy board, such that the materials are also of that natural feel. There's been some concerns about the garage, and the developer is here if there are any further questions regarding the garages. But we want to make sure we're doing everything possible to make sure that living within these homes is nice. So we certainly don't want to, I don't want to speak for the developer, but certainly doesn't want to put a product out there that's going to be under par. But from a material standpoint, the materials would be natural elements, and the garage doors themselves would be more of a carriage style to kind of have that more natural feeling to the development. All the front yards would be sodded, and the streetscapes would also complement the architecture. I want to thank you all very much for your time, and I'll be available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. Wisniewski.
Chairman Jones, Planning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. On a personal level, Kathy, I'm glad you explained our relationship because I wasn't sure where it was going, and I wasn't sure what Donna was going to say when I got home, so I appreciate that. Pretoria Falls is a project that we first looked at for a townhouse development similar to our Braxton Park which is 3/4 sold out on Manson Pike. However, after looking at the project, we realized that it was more suited for single-family detached residential to mimic our Tuscany product, as Margaret Ann has stated. The renderings that you saw in front of you, and can you show me how to operate this gizmo? Fantastic. Whoop, there we go. Perfect. Okay, perfect. Good. And I'm driving with this one here? Great. So the renderings that you see in front of you are the actual renderings of the homes that were already built at Tuscany, which now is sold out 32 out of 34 in a year and a half. Very successful project. We initially geared this project to be, as Margaret Ann stated, an empty nester, age suggestive, not restrictive. Because of that, when we were at the planning staff meeting, Councilman Smotherman brought up the fact that, well, if it's not completely age restrictive, maybe it would make sense to put something in there for younger children, and or if folks had grandchildren come to visit. So we did down by the dog park. We also put in a playground. We've enhanced as the sidewalks meander on through, we've enhanced the setting areas and swing areas, once again to promote people to walk, be healthy, and places where they can congregate. The one concern that Margaret Ann had was regarding, wrong mouse, sorry about that, was regarding the garage size, and I understand the concern. So with that being a concern, we went to Tuscany to actually measure the houses that were built there. And Margaret Ann, am I going the wrong way in the, yep, I guess I am. Are those pictures actually on the slide?
I don't know if your client put them on the slides, but I have them available if our
Okay.
cable department
So,
wants to change feeds to my computer instead of the lectern.
oh, there we go. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, appreciate that. So you're driving? Okay.
This is on my computer, right?
Very good, okay. So this here is a picture of 2307 River Terrace Drive, which we also developed where I'm living currently. And inside the garage, and it's a 19 by 19 inside garage. Well, we have a Lincoln Battleship, their Navigator, along with a full-size Jeep Cherokee and a hot water tank and a full-size refrigerator and 2 ladders and the garbage can, and still 4 feet between the cars. So
How do you get your baby out of the car seat? And
what's that?
How do you get the baby out of the car seat? Because that's
Okay.
my concern.
No, totally understand. So on the white Jeep that you're looking at, I have 4 feet between the cars, and I have 3 feet on the other side, which accommodates my wife and her baby, who's a little Maltese. So we've lived there now for 6 months and have no issue with that.
No.
The other slide was a house that we have built, which is our Maggio plan over at Tuscany. And inside that garage, you've got a Lexus SUV, a Ford Thunderbird, a refrigerator, 2 shelving units, I believe, stand-up tool bench, and also your hot water tank. So I understand that a 19 by 19 or 20 by 20 doesn't accommodate everybody. It wouldn't accommodate me because my personal house that I'm remodeling is about 3,000 feet garage. However, everything we've built at Tuscany, and this plan was based on everything we did at Tuscany, that is working swimmingly. If you drive through the neighborhood, there is nothing outside, as by design of the restrictions, but also because that's what we wanted it to turn out to be. If you pull on through, every house has a minimum of 2 cars, either in the garage or 1 in the driveway. There's no one parked on the street. All the garbage cans are located in the garage. All the hot water tanks are in the garage, plus play items for if they have children and or this young man that has some adult play items. So we're not opposed to making the garages slightly bigger, but the plans that we have proposed for this project are currently being built and currently are able that you can navigate them with 2 cars. We're not phobic to developing slightly difficult projects. We brought one before the Planning Commission over 12 years ago at Riverbend Park. And then the Tuscany site, which is on Thompson Lane, which of course is an arterial that everybody's concerned about. And we've made both of those projects work swimmingly. Both projects command the highest price per square foot of any homes in Murfreesboro at over $240 a square foot. So we believe we've done enough work to make sure that we would ensure a quality development and a quality built product. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Wisniewski? Thank you.
I have a question for the producer. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
Mr. Dunn.
Thank you. You had pointed out there was 50% green space. That seemed a little confusing to me. It didn't seem like there would be 50% green space. Could you elaborate a little bit further?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. Is it possible to get the presentation back?
You have to talk to the cable department. There you go. You're the one controlling it behind the screen.
There we go. There we go. Learn something new every day here. And that's a great question. So because it's a horizontal property regime, there are no lot lines. The lot lines associated with this site are just the boundary line of the property itself. Everything you see shaded in green that is not either orange, red, or yellow, or the gray color with the roadways, that's going to be dedicated open space, such that everything would be owned by the HOA, and that would be maintained by the HOA. Very similar, as Ms. Green pointed out, to a condominium complex, where a maintenance group would come and maintain your front yard, and as well as those natural areas. The 51%, yes, this would be included as well in that 51%. But that also goes into, from a stormwater quality standpoint, how are we doing less impervious surface on this site? So 5.4 acres is pervious surface on this site, and that's from a planning and a landscape architectural side of things. That's phenomenal. That's what we want to see. We want to see at least half the site be able to capture that stormwater to try to refill the aquifers over a long period of time, instead of just throwing the water to a neighbor or throwing it into a detention pond. So that's where that number comes from. Now, from the standpoint of this area being open space, this area being open space, as well as this area, and these areas, that's about 30% of the site. So those larger pieces are about 30% of the site. But from an overall standpoint, it's 5.4 acres is going to be dedicated open space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Other questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, we're going to open the public hearing, and I will remind all of you that since there are quite a few people here that want to speak, you do have 3 minutes when you come to the podium. You can come one time per public hearing, so Mr. Silk, you can come back again this time. Have another 3 minutes to speak, but once you speak, we cannot let you come back up to the podium. So if everybody, you know, I hate to seem so mean about that, but that's the way it has to work for our public hearings, just to make sure that everybody gets to speak and that they don't just go on for all night long with everybody coming back for another 3 minutes. So we will open this public hearing at this time, and please come forward, state your name, your address, and give us your 3 minutes of comments regarding this zoning application.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. My name is Daniel Bruner. I live at 3696 Asbury Lane, so we're adjacent to the property for development. The details, I did enjoy the details that were given for the presentation, especially with the connection to nature. Speaking with the neighbors more often now, we also all have found out we have this connection for nature. That's why we're in this area. However, our connection for nature doesn't really fit within this 10-foot span from house to house, if you get what I'm saying. What I'm really wanting, what my family's really wanting, and I think we've been fairly well with it so far, is this transparency. We don't want it to be where it's us and them. We don't want sides versus sides, but we want to be able to see this through the eyes of the developer, and we're hoping that everyone else would want to see it through our eyes as the citizens that live in this area. We're not anti-development. We're definitely pro-logical development, and something that can enhance the qualities of our corner of the county that we have right now for both the existing citizens and those that are wanting to move into this area, because it's extremely popular. We want them to come, but it needs to fit within what we have going right now. And I want to make sure that we focus and try and keep a focus on the preservation of the environment. logically to develop a portion of a floodplain that over hundreds of thousands of years was created, and within 2 years of development, they want to change what nature made. That just sort of really, it's hard for me to wrap my head around seeing something like that happen. Also, coming to the focus with the privacy for the homeowners. We talked about having good buffer zones. We love our trees. We want to make sure there's a good selection that we can go out and be with our nature without having to worry about seeing what's going on just a couple of feet away. So working with that as well. And then also safety for the roads and the drivers and you know, pedestrians, if any. That's a hard road to walk on. But if they're wanting this kind of thing to happen, having the Asbury roads to be more pedestrian friendly would be really awesome. A sort of, you know, the metaphor of like with Asbury roads right now, if you were to think of it as the artery for in someone's body, the congestions that's happening at Medical Center in Asbury are really, you know, almost close to a heart attack proportion, if you want to make a metaphor about it like that. And just for when it's all said and done, just want to make sure everybody realizes that when everyone goes home, when this is all over, we're the ones that'll still be there living with the decisions that are made for this development. Thanks.
Who's next?
Again, my name is Doug Hayes. I live at 3858 Asbury Lane, and I appreciate your time tonight. I know that hours are getting long. I want to quickly touch on what he brought up, which was the working with the city on the 2040 plan. The congestion that we're faced with right now is entering in on Medical Center Parkway and I-24. That artery that he's speaking about, that is adjusting the map and adjusting the maybes and the what ifs, that doesn't address the people entering into the Medical Center Parkway area. Again, that's right where the interstate is. This is North Murfreesboro. So this is obviously a choice for people who are commuters and who need to commute. I have sent in a proposal to everyone here tonight, trying to strike a compromise. As my neighbor Daniel said, we're not looking to fight, we're looking to work with. The 5.6 units per acre is just not fitting with the area. This goes in proportion with, you know, the fact that this western tail of this development is going to have to be built on the floodplain. They brought up concerns with keeping with nature and green space in this development. My proposal is, one, you know, if this goes through, we need to limit the zoning rights to where they can't, you know, the 5.6 units per acre is too much. But not want to take anything away from them. If they take this western portion and dedicate that to their community's green space, they are adding value to the residents of this community. It's reducing the units per acre and the density of this development, which at least helps some of the traffic burden and the school burden and everything else that comes with this dense of a place. On top of that, it protects the privacy of both the surrounding neighbors, especially the Bennetts, which I don't know if you could bring this up again, but this development is butted up right at their doorstep. And if the developers were willing to work with the city, yes, right there. So their house is literally right there, and currently they're surrounded by beautiful landscape, beautiful trees right by the creek. They're going to be sharing areas with this development, no doubt. But if the development can work with us and the city can work with us in lowering the density and the units per acre and the zoning type, I don't know the codes, but I know that this is maximum density. If we could segment that western portion, we help protect the quality of life for the residents that are there. We help protect the environment by not allowing building up on the floodplain and giving some buffer to the overall creek. But we also give value to the residents of this community to have a better green space. Spring Creek has something very similar to it, where there's a walkway and a park. You could put even a retention pond if you need to back there. And ultimately, we need to find ways to reduce the amount of people until the infrastructure meets with the demand. And right now, right now our roads are being completely torn up with this construction. It will limit the amount of dump trucks and everything that's going to have to backfill to make this floodplain development happen. So I guess my plea is both for the developer and for the city to consider the zoning type, and for the developer to think about this idea as a win-win for everybody, to add value to their community and work better with the neighbors that are already there. Thank you.
Again, I'm Richard Silk, formerly of 3050 Asbury Lane, currently of Scotland Drive off Greenland. The only dog I really have in this fight is that I'm concerned of the future of Murfreesboro, and if you put in, I hate to use the word ghetto, but if you put in homes with only 5-foot lot lines, you're basically projecting towards a future Baltimore. Having lived on Asbury Lane, I'd like to point out that some people have been saying Asbury, and we need to get the H out of there. The street, Asbury Lane, on its way to the intersection that they have been describing to you with Medical Center Boulevard, has a bend in it. And whenever it rains, and even sometimes when it doesn't rain, the traffic through there often ends up in the trees along the side of the creek. It is extremely hazardous. And if the developers would consider what the previous gentleman was referring to as decreasing the density of homes per acre, you're also looking at having to build a future school to take in the influx of the family members. The school near where I live is Reeves Rogers, and it has been blown away with development, apartment complexes and the like. So again, consider your schools and the population effect on the schools. The streets was projecting a route to, I believe he said Manson Pike, and I'm sorry I almost interrupted him. I don't see how you're going to get a street down beside the creek over to Manson. I don't see that at all. So now there could be a street running across from Asbury Road over, which brings us to the other issue. Across the street from Asbury Road is the Sykes Old Farmstead, which is actually an historic Civil War hospital. And that's a beautiful place, possibly scheduled for historic zoning someday, and this development may interfere with that. The historic nature and the rustic scenery of the place. So again, we have traffic, we have the intersection with Medical Center Parkway, we have the schools, and most of all, FEMA. And I address this most to the developers. What the city does is what the city does, but FEMA is definitely going to be something you're going to have to reckon with. A retention pond and a detention pond would be awesome. They have those in all the new neighborhoods, notably next to the parking lots across from MTSU on South Rutherford. There's a lotus pond, which is a retention pond, and there's a detention pond, which actually dries up and drains. They were mowing it today with a mower. So those would be awesome help outs for the flooding issue. That's basically it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission. I am Keith Gamble. I live at 3867 Asbury Road. That is the historic property that was just mentioned. So I live on 19.2 acres. My family and I have owned that property for 2 years. We believe it's really a treasure of nature there. Not only were we drawn to the property because of the historic character, You can find our home as the McGregor home on the map of the Stones River battlefield. Our home was a field hospital in the Civil War. We were also attracted by the beauty of Overall Creek and the nature in Overall Creek. Currently, there's family of deer, family of turkeys. We see hawks, owls that live with us at that creek. My family and I strongly ask for you to help protect the environment of Overall Creek. I want to echo Doug's suggestion that western portion, the buildings that are happening adjacent to the creek, perhaps that could be preserved as a green space to help protect Overall Creek. I live just downstream from where that development would happen. I think the eastern portion can still happen. That's the area they highlighted as primed for development. It's going to take major construction work to get the western portion ready. So I ask if you could protect the environment of Overall Creek by keeping that building away from that western portion. But thank you for listening to my concerns and the concerns of my neighbor.
Hello again. I'm going to need to bring this down. I'm delighted to hear about permeable land and water retention and water soaking into the ground. I would like to point out that Mother Nature exists on my property, which is 3818 Asbury Road. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself again. I'm Emily McConnell. I'm Christopher Bennett's wife. I'm also, the veil that drains into the creek goes across my property. We do depend on water flow from this site onto that to feed those trees and to those trees then clean the water the rainwater as it flows, as you referred to, Mother Nature's work. I'm also concerned about the developer seems to have taken the 2040 plan quite literally, drawing a line through my property as a proposed road. I've been told by the planning committee that is an approximation, a description of flow, and not a literal line. I don't know if that's been communicated to this developer. My understanding is that the road would likely continue down Asbury Road and then across the MTSU fields that are currently used. Let's see. Those are my 2 points. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Connell.
Hello, Christopher Bennett, husband next door. I think the risk is to treat this as an everyday situation. This is not a typical situation. It is unsafe to raise the density, and at this point, we would love it if we could get home safely, not die, and then welcome future developments. But at this point, it is very dangerous. I invite everyone to come at rush hour and look at the chaos, please. And this 3 to 6 months of looking at that road will just prove that it's insane and that the density should probably be looked at. So I'm just saying this is not normal. This is that we're already at risk, and to please show care and to us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Good evening, all. My name is Sherry Brown, and I have lived at 3818 Asbury Road since February of 2017. Excuse me. I live with Chris Bennett and his wife Kitty. Some of what I've written here I may need to amend. I've heard some good information tonight. But before I go on about this project, I want to let you know that for 5 years, I worked with the Regional Planning Commission up in northern New Hampshire, and I enjoyed the work. It was not so much with planning, but it was with HUD, Community Development Block Grant Programs. With that, I worked with engineers, architects, designers, And some of those planners rubbed off on me a little bit. So I kind of feel at home here. So here we go. On July 10th, 2019, I spoke before this board against the zoning amendment application for Spring Creek Townhouse single-family home development located on Asbury Lane. My sole reason being against the approval of the additional 9 to 10 units is the extremely hazardous intersection at Asbury Lane and Medical Center Parkway. The planner for the project, Margaret Ann Green, agreed with me that it's impossible to make a left-hand turn. She also stated that it is impossible to put a traffic light at that intersection. Impossible. So, you as the Planning Commission, you have recommended approval to the City Council, which is City Council approved, 2 separate subdivisions on Asbury Lane. That's approximately 300 units. If we do some simple math, just based off of 2 vehicles for those 2 subdevelopments, you're looking at, I just lost my spot. You're looking at 1,200 vehicle trips a day. This project here, 60 units, 4 vehicles per unit. You're now looking at over 1,500 possible vehicle trips per day on this tiny little country road that is now becoming a collector getting to the highway. I just feel that this board would be negligent in your duties to even consider this project, let alone approving it. The city of Murfreesboro has no immediate plans within the next 1 to 5 years to address our serious traffic problems. I'm encouraged to hear that there's going to be a little bit of a study. We're looking at it, 3 to 6 months. But as we know, construction takes time. You have to have time to come up with some money to pay for things. Adding another 60-unit development onto a road that isn't even built out. Kingsbury has they've just been pushing dirt around the past 2 years. There's no home on it. Spring Creek, there's a few units that are occupied. We have not seen the worst of what's to come at us. And I am fearful somebody is going to get killed. And I'd hate to think about being in your shoes and sleeping at night because of your actions. That's it. Thank you. I care about the citizens of our city and our county. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Who else? Last call. All right, we will close the public hearing on this item. And a few questions you want to address, Ms. Green? Rules, the road.
Yeah.
Retention and detention.
Okay. The plan of services identified that the property would be in the overall Creek City School Zone, so if annexed, and then if developed, the residents would have an option of attending either city or county schools, K through 6, and then of course after 6th grade, they would go to a county school system. The city of Murfreesboro said that it's within our ability to accommodate the estimated number of children that could result from this development. So the feedback we got from Murfreesboro City Schools is that they could accommodate this, the growth that would be associated with this if it were to be approved. And the plan, of course, doesn't have engineered drawings or stormwater calculations yet, so the details of the stormwater system would need to be worked out. But you can see that there is a retention pond, which retains water, shown within the triangle of units on the site plan. And they're proposing for it to have a fountain to help aerate the water and keep it from getting stagnant, and to actually create that as an amenity. There are also proposed detention ponds, which detain water for some amount of time, and that time, of course, is based on the stormwater calculations that we would receive. They're showing them in proposed locations. The location of those facilities on a development have to do with the topography of the site, where water would be draining naturally now and where it would drain after a grading and drainage plan is prepared. So we would, of course, require the grading and drainage plan and the detention and retention plan, in addition to the stormwater calculations, with the technical submittal of site plan if this were to be approved tonight. And so those are elements that are, of course, being shown here. We were asked to consider preserving trees that are within a foot of an existing fence line. And the largely depends, of course, on the grading and drainage plan, on what that looks like. If they're grading an area, then we look at that. What we ask for the developer to do, if that's a plan, is to do a tree survey where they identify the location of trees, the species of trees, the size of trees, and also prepare a tree preservation plan. Some trees, I can attest for the hackberry in my backyard, are more of a safety hazard. It fell in my house twice before I paid $2,500 to have it cut down. And so those type trees we would not encourage to remain. However, if they're healthy and existing, we don't have anything in our ordinance that requires it, but we certainly encourage the preservation of trees, and we can ask the developer to speak to his willingness to do that as well. There are, to help encourage the preservation of existing healthy trees, we allow the developers to have credits or tree credits for existing large healthy trees. And so we view that as a carrot type incentive. Instead of a carrot or stick, we use different types of incentives at various times, but we use more of the carrot approach with encouraging preserving those trees. And I can see why that would be important. Of course, the landscaping or the trees that are along the 50 foot along the river itself are required to maintain. The first 35 feet you can't do anything with, but the remaining 15 feet you can maintain but not remove the vegetation. So what you see along the river would need to stay. We've done some research into how to protect stream banks, and we find out, of course, existing vegetation does it best, and actually shrubs are very effective because they stabilize the soil. And so, of course, you'd be looking at runoff, and you'd also want to make sure that the flow of the water were stabilized as well. So the stormwater regulations are very specific about what needs to stay there. And if it were a barren, some places don't have any shade or trees, we require them to be planted there. And so the tree survey, of course, would give us that information. I will say, and I've been to Baltimore several times, there's nothing about this development that's like Baltimore, inner city Baltimore anyway. The separation, the 10 feet between houses, is a decrease than what we may see on larger lots, but nothing about this is similar to row houses in Baltimore. Although Baltimore's making come around, I don't want to talk too bad about them, but it's nothing like it. The let's see. Of course, density is a matter for you to consider as the Planning Commission. We have our future land use map, and we have our land use regulations for you to look at. And of course, I've provided for you and can provide for you again the density for the other developments that are in the city that are located very near to this property. And I think there were a couple comments asking the developer or the Planning Commission to consider reducing the number of units. That's of course something you can consider. You can either require it, or he can offer it, or you can conclude that you think that the density is appropriate as submitted. But that's certainly, as a planned development, something that would be appropriate for you to discuss and opine upon tonight. Were there some other topics that I needed to go through?
Will you speak to the Thoroughfare Plan and the idea of the kind of the gap between the two sections and other possibilities related to that?
So we had, at the pinch point, at the request of our Public Works and Development Services staff, I had a meeting with our team to look at this project. And because we know that that major transportation plan, the 2040 major transportation plan, did just show potential pathways or connections for roads, we asked for the developer's engineer to help us look at possible future locations for that road, and where the major transportation plan shows the road crossing Overall Creek, and it would cross Overall Creek, not run alongside Overall Creek, would require a bridge, and of course bridges are expensive to build and have quite a bit of design. We asked for them to look at crossing Overall Creek at the narrowest portion, because that, of course, would affect any future bridge designs. Bridges also have to adhere to our FEMA regulations, which, of course, like I mentioned, were given to us by the federal government to adopt. And so they have to stay out of the floodway, and they have to have a span that is long enough to not be underwater during that 100-year flood event when it will occur, because we know it's something that will occur. And so one of those options showed the road actually turning south. And so we asked for them at that pinch point to reserve a 100-foot potential area for the road to go through with a 60-foot collector design there. And I know I had a conversation, Mr. Huddleston may be able to provide additional information on it, but that was as a result of us saying we don't know the alignment, but we don't want this development to take away any future possibility of doing a better design. And so that's why they have shown that there as potential future right-of-way in that location. So it was because looking for that more narrow portion of Overall Creek to cross.
Other questions from the Planning Commission?
I have a question for the developer on how, if we could have a little more clarity on, maybe, we spoke about the AE flood zone and how the redevelopment of that land would happen, and I think maybe it would be helpful for some of the residents to know how the redevelopment of that land occurs, so that you can perform the letter of map amendment to get that property out of the AE flood zone. I know that I'm pretty kind of familiar with that, but I think, again, transparency is very important. Would be a very good way of helping us out on that.
Absolutely. Since I'm the developer, not the engineer, I'll defer that question to my engineers.
Sure.
And then if there's any questions for me afterwards, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ryan Lovelace with CSDG, civil engineer on the project. We have to go through a long process post-construction, and that process is not only just working with staff, but also going through FEMA after the grading operations are complete. So we have to go through a process. Are you wanting to know all the details and explain it, how to get through the LOMR process?
Kind of just a brief synopsis of the process of how it's done would be great.
So we have to, as part of our construction plans, which you guys will be seeing eventually if this gets approved tonight and through the city council, we bring it back to you and get staff's approval to meet the regulations for grading in the floodplain. Of course, floodway we cannot touch, but grading in the floodplain. And then as part of that, we have a certain requirement, a certain amount of, is it 1 foot above floodplain for the finished floors? I think it is. Okay, 1 foot. Finished floors in the city of Mount Juliet are required to be 1 foot above floodplain. So all our finished floors have to be either meet that 1 foot or be higher. After construction is complete, as far as grading operations go, we go out there and do an as-built topo, which is we go out there and do a survey, topographical survey of the dirt to prove to staff and eventually prove to FEMA that we are now out of the floodplain. We have raised the dirt above the floodplain elevation. We submit that as-built topographical survey to FEMA after staff has signed off on it. And then after a 3-month process of review and comments and go back and forth, we will receive approval that this portion of the property is now out of the floodplain. Okay. And at that point, we are out of the floodplain.
So my last question on this, and I appreciate that, it's a good explanation. On the neighborhood meeting that we heard, one of the biggest concerns was water runoff. And so infilling that land or raising it up, raising the base flood elevation up, I would assume, or I want to make sure that in that study that you all do, that ensures that no additional water runoff occurs with the raising of that land and that base flood elevation. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's certain requirements that you guys have in your zoning ordinance that we can do certain manipulations in the floodplain and floodways, well, not floodways, but floodplains. But we will meet whatever regulations and requirements you guys allow us to do and not go any further than that.
Thank you.
While you're up there, the Hammerhead intersection that's at the back of the neighborhood there next to the Bark Park, you keep referring to raising the elevation to above floodplain. Would that roadway and the Bark Park and all those amenity type things be above the floodplain, or would they be in the floodplain?
Typically, we leave those areas in the floodplain to minimize the areas that we're grading in the floodplain. Because what we want to do is have the finished floors in the homes above the floodplain. And the Hammerhead, we work with staff if they would require it to be exactly at the floodplain, maybe as a requirement of the staff. Dog Park, no, it would be probably below the floodplain. Again, we're trying to minimize any kind of impacts to the floodplain. And those dog park areas are obviously not an area that, if you're having a storm of a 100-year flood, you're not at your dog park, kind of thought.
Yeah, we've had some pretty catastrophic rainstorms around here in the last 10 years, and without going back 100 years. Absolutely. To see what a 100-year flood looks like, I think. But the detention pond, would the detention pond be above the floodplain?
The detention pond, yes, it's above the floodplain. So those detention ponds are detention and water quality. They're serving dual purposes. And we'll provide you guys with a more detailed site plan at the next step, where these ponds will be finalized with elevations and final sizes and the water qualities and the depth of the water inside to treat it for water quality purposes. So we have quite a few more steps to go through. This is really just conceptual. But I do believe staff normally makes you have it at the 100-year flood or above.
Well, currently it's in the 100-year floodplain, and where it's drawn on these pictures here. Yep. And it's not a detention pond if it's below water, I guess is my whole point. Mm-hmm. And so it's not detaining anything or retaining any water at all. And my concern with the Hammer, if it gets underwater, then where does the garbage truck turn around? Because that looks to me like the only option for a garbage truck to turn around in the whole neighborhood. I truthfully don't see 51% green on here, and I keep looking for it, trying to find it, and I'm assuming that the detention and retention areas are being considered green space. Although we're considering them amenities on one side, and now we're considering them green space on the other. But the pinch point, which is a proposed road going through there, if you look at the county residents' homes and stuff that are developed along there, they're right in line with that pinch point almost. I mean, I'm personally not condemning somebody's house so we can build a road so it coincides just to make it okay for a developer on a neighborhood. We're often asked the question up here, which come first, the chicken or the egg? And in this particular case, we've got Asbury Lane with no H, that is a what looks to me like a substandard county road currently, and it's not completely built out yet. And if the chicken is if the chicken's the roadway, we need the chicken out there, because the roadway needs to be in place to support this condition that we're creating. And there's 2 or 3 places in town that I continuously complain about, and they said, well, that was done years ago, and you know, there's nothing we can do about that intersection now. And this is just an example, I think, of 20 years from now, if we haven't fixed this problem, people are going to say, who was the idiot that designed this without this infrastructure in place or the roadway in place?
And the one thing I do want to point out, I don't think anything about this is ghetto. When you look at the project and the development and the comparison of Tuscany, this is not ghetto. This is a really nice neighborhood and a really nice project. But we in the city are currently limited on the amount of sewer that we can take. And so we're starting to have to look at projects from a different perspective when it comes to density. And I still see this as a very dense neighborhood. And I've got a big concern with the floodplain. I've got a concern with the roadway. I've got a concern with the density. And I've got a concern with any projected roadway that the 2040 might show that currently goes through county property hands. This is not a political speech, I assure you that, because I think everybody that spoke here is from the county, and they can't vote for me or against me. But this is a situation of where we need to look at the projects and say, is this good for Murfreesboro? And in this particular case, as much as I like this project, the timing is wrong and the location is wrong for this project, I think. I'm struggling with the density, I'm struggling with the roadway, I'm struggling with the floodplain, the trash pickup part of it. There's just the garages, I mean, the list goes on and on that I've got concerns with. And I think that at some point we have to look at Asbury Lane and understand that it's not built out yet with what we've already approved. And as has been said multiple times tonight, I guess, if you really want to understand how bad the problem is, go out there at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon and try to get off Asbury Lane onto Medical Center Parkway, because there's no problem getting on Asbury Lane, but getting off Asbury Lane is a nightmare. And so I'm having a hard time with this one.
Other comments, questions from the Planning Commission?
I'll speak just to a few things. You know, obviously, there are lots of areas within the city where we push in and infringe in on the floodplain, and we make accommodations to that through, you know, map amendments and so on and so forth, and do that. But I think obviously floodplains move all the time through erosion. As development, you know, happens, the floodplain does move. And so, you know, I think having good ordinance in place, you know, where we are acknowledging those things happen and we're dealing with the water and trying to make ourselves neutral is at least an effort to acknowledge that those things happen and try to remediate them where we can. You know, related to the density, I don't particularly disagree with what Mr. Smotherman's saying. On the other side of that coin, we're talking about 60 units, and so, you know, when I look at the body of what comes through, and we've got 300 units on the ground on Asbury Lane, it'd be hard for me to say this 60 units is going to cause failure, ultimate failure at that intersection. And you know, if we talk about reducing the density, if you take 10% off this, you're talking about 6 houses. So I mean, you know, in my mind, this is not a 300 house development that is packed in dense. I do understand it's 10 acres, and you know, I might chuckle a little bit at that 51% green space, but you know, I understand the math is the math. You know, I think for me, obviously, Asbury Lane, as it connects to Medical Center Parkway, I think the property owner makes a great argument that, you know, is it an Asbury Lane issue or is it a Medical Center Parkway issue? That's an interesting argument, I think. But I do know that we have long-term plans. We know that this is a place that needs some improvement. It's also very interesting that, you know, with the annexation laws the way they are, you know, it's highly unlikely that we will encompass this, because someone would have to ask for us to do this, especially to the already developed subdivisions and rooftops that are there. And so as the city continues to grow, you know, a lot of these, I'm not suggesting that some of the current residents would sell to do that, but there's probably more of that that's going to happen, which will put pressure on the infrastructure. And, you know, Mr. Smotherman and I, we could have this conversation a lot, and we do. We would love to have, you know, 4-lane highways and bike lanes everywhere in Murfreesboro with very little traffic on it, but most of the time people don't want to pay for that infrastructure while it sits. And in this case, you're talking about, this is really county property in which we would not come in and improve a lot of county property. And that's always a challenge from the standpoint of, you know, we certainly, I wouldn't take this position, and I don't think this board would take this position that, you know, you're not city residents. None of us feel that way. We don't think that way. And so there is a strong sense of responsibility, but, you know, Asbury Lane has been an issue, as far as I'm concerned, for a long time in the city. And candidly, you know, I walked this property on Sunday and drove in and out of Asbury Lane a couple of times and went out to Old Nashville Highway. I mean, there are some outlets that are not favorable. You know, I wouldn't consider them favorable if I lived there today, but there are some access points that you can get out of. And the real challenge is turning left on Medical Center Parkway. I mean, you're not going to do that at certain times of the day. It's just not going to happen. But, you know, I drove by, I live across the interstate, and I drive by this site, you know, every day. And I was by at 8 o'clock this morning, and there were 0 cars waiting on Asbury Lane. So like many of the intersections that we have in town that are problems, they're not problems 24 hours of the day or even 8 hours of the day. They're pressure points on that based on commuter traffic, and I would, you know, acknowledge that. But I'm not sure all of those facts today are enough for me to not give support to the project.
Other comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
So, 2 questions, one for you, Margaret Ann, or Sam. On page, well, what we've got in front of us, page 8, it does show a turn-in lane that would be part of this improvement to this development, along with heading north above that turn lane. I'm assuming that they would be required to widen the road based upon it being on their side of the street. Is that going to happen at the time when the development starts, or does that happen, those road improvements to Asbury Lane, assuming this is what's going to happen, or as part of the site plan approval, when do those road improvements happen? When do those take place?
We saw a similar situation with Spring Creek to the south, and I think people who live there will see there were roadway improvements associated with the development itself. The Planning Commission can set a time frame. Generally, we see it as it develops, not before it develops. So they're out there doing site work, preparing the site. And generally, the developer will want to put it off and sell homes to recoup the cost of it. And sometimes we ask for them to do it sooner. If it were a state highway, which this is not, we generally require those turn lane improvements to be done when there are 75 units built. Of course, this is only a 60-unit development, so that is a different type scenario. They have shown this as 2 phases. Basically, the bigger triangle is 1 phase, and then the smaller to the back is the 2nd phase. The sewer would be coming from Overall Creek, so they would be doing work at that pinch point pretty early on. But the right-of-way dedication would come absolutely first, because like you said, we would require them to dedicate right-of-way on Asbury Lane and Asbury Road so that there is enough right-of-way for the entire frontage. In addition to that, we consider the operation or the actual effect that the cars coming and going on this property would have, and we want for them to whoever mentioned that these are substandard roads were right, we would want them to be provided a refuge. So if, while waiting for an opportunity to turn to site, to be in a turn lane and not in the lane of travel. And that's an operational issue that we look at quite frequently. So it can be something that's set with the zoning, or you can look at that with the site plan review. It generally comes in the middle of the development, though, somewhere around there, so, but that can move.
I'll just, this is strictly my opinion, but I would tell the developer, if this is approved, I think that those roadway improvements and the turn lanes and that sort of thing needs to be done sooner than later. Because we know where this is going to impact this road, this development is. And I don't know what the exact timing of that would be, but I'd hope that you would understand, if it is approved, that those things like I said, need to happen sooner than later. The other question that I have is, and this kind of goes back to what Mr. Smotherman was talking about on this Hammerhead, and we've got a dog park there, but we don't have any places to park. I know that we've got 4 parking spaces in an open area that is south of the Hammerhead, but I mean, we're just assuming that everybody's going to walk from the front of the subdivision all the way back to utilize the dog park, or park there and then walk behind the houses or in front of. I didn't know if there would be any reason or thought process to put any parking spaces near that dog park. If you did that, you're probably going to lose a unit. But I don't know if that's possible or not.
I believe in the site plan that is possible. To address the first concern, which was the roadway improvements, we would build this development the same as we did Tuscany, so therefore before the first house was finished, at the time we're paving all the roads in that section, that would be paved also. So the turn lane would go in up front,
okay,
not just dug out and left to be paved at the end. So those improvements would go in on the front of the project,
okay,
as we're paving phase 1. As far as the development in the back with the dog park and also with the play area, we have no issue at all with raising that, to the point that Mr. Smotherman brought up. Well, if you have a hammerhead and it's underwater, it's no longer usable. We can look at that with engineering and with staff to go ahead and raise that. That's not an issue for us to do. The other thing is to look at parking. That's not a concern either as far as altering that site plan. Understand your concern, and I believe we do have room for additional parking there.
Other questions? Comments?
I will just make one more comment. I forgot to say this earlier. When I attended actually Chase and I were both at the neighborhood meeting, and one of the concerns that was brought up was the water quality of overall creek. And I did not, the algae blooms and some of those other things, and I didn't know much about that, so I spent a little time researching that. And I do know that section of creek from Overall Creek is currently not an impaired stream, but obviously the more development that you have and the more surface runoff you have, the more potential there is to do that. But I just wanted you to know that I did look into that since you brought it up at the neighborhood meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve, subject to any staff comments.
I apologize. I spoke in the middle of that. Would you mind repeating?
Yes, ma'am. I will make a motion to approve, subject to staff comments.
Can I ask for
Yes, ma'am.
clarification, as I always do? Would those comments be that there be additional parking for the dog park, and that the dog park be raised so that it's out of the 100-year floodplain, and that the roadway improvements be done before the first C of O is issued for the first house?
I believe those would be
Or those-
favorable
The one-
to ask for.
Garages. You don't do anything about the.
Oh, and the garages, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yes,
And
I believe
so-
those would be appropriate.
I'm just clarifying. I'm not commenting. The roadway was raised, the Hammerhead roadway.
Okay.
And dog park, yes, no, I don't know, whatever y'all say, but the
Was that the
road
recommendation by,
is what was,
then yes, I would include that in the staff comments, in the motion.
to address Mr. Smotherman's concern about the trash pickup, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure we're all on the
Still-
same page.
Thank you, Chairwoman Jones. Still learning.
Thank you, no, you did perfect. Thank you, Mr. Stiles. So we have a motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
And one abstention. Okay. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight and for participating in this hearings. And we do still have 3 more hearings tonight. So as you leave, if you would gather to discuss your continued comments out in the hallway so we can continue our meeting. You're welcome to stay here for the rest of our meeting, though. Our next item will be a zoning application for approximately 8.14 acres located along Shores Road to amend the West Lawn PUD to modify the buffering and screening plan along Shores Road. D.R. Horton, Inc. is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. I'll try to get through this quickly. The applicant, D.R. Horton, is requesting to amend the West Lawn Plan Unit Development Pattern Book to allow changes to the landscape buffer design for the berm, the width, and the species for a portion along the Shores Road. The West Lawn PUD was originally approved by the City Council in 2007 and amended in 2010. The approved pattern book depicts the landscaping buffers along Shores Road for the purposes of screening the existing homes along the south side of Shores Road from views of the new houses that would be constructed. The reason for the request was approximately 2 years ago during the review of Section 5 plat maps. Planning staff noted that when they were reviewing it, that portions of Section 4, of Phase 4, where the required buffer was not installed, and notified the developer's engineering rep, SEC, of the situation. SEC then studied the conditions, and due to the location and the depth of the drainage channel for Section 4, and also due to the growth of the vegetation that was planted as it's grown over the years, that it's infeasible to tear out the vegetation and alter the ditch. And rather than doing that, their preferred approach would be to keep the vegetation there in place and modify the pattern book to match the conditions that are out there and add additional vegetation where it was feasible. The applicant has requested today a deferral of this item to October 2nd in order to hold a neighborhood meeting and with the HOA to provide them additional information and clarification. It appears there's some misunderstanding in the community about what's being requested, and staff is supportive of their deferral request if the commission so entertains. The recommendation is that you do conduct a public hearing because it was notified. Notifications were sent out, so we do need to hold that public hearing tonight. And then if it is continued and deferred to October 2nd, you would not need to do an additional public hearing unless there's some significant changes that they make, and then we would re-notify the public at that point. The applicant's representative, SEC, is here tonight to make a presentation of the changes that they're asking for. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Melchan.
Good evening, Chairman Jones, members of the Planning Commission, and Rob Ulch at SEC. Give me a second here. Let me get this. kind of go through this brief presentation really quick to kind of give you guys a background. I do want to talk about what Marina did request. We are going to talk about wanting to request a deferral tonight to the October 2nd meeting on that side. The neighborhood did receive their letters from the city last week, mid to late week. At that point in time, a number of questions were raised by the residents that did receive those letters in West Lawn. There was also some of the residents along Shores Road that also received the letters as well, had some questions. I know I've fielded a few phone calls, and Mr. Matt Dowdle with D.R. Horton, my client, has been in contact with the HOA and the residents of West Lawn in regards to what we want to do is defer so we can have a little bit of a neighborhood meeting in the coming weeks before the October 2nd meeting to sit down and go through what I'm going to explain here really quickly tonight and get them more understanding what's going on. I think it's more about confusion as it is anything on that side. So hopefully tonight's presentation and also our neighborhood meeting will help make the residents of West Lawn and also Shores Road understand what this amendment's about in regards to modifying these buffers on that side. So with that, let me get into this real quick. We've got two main areas. As you can see, the blue area is all the West Lawn. The green area on the northern side is the apartments that have recently been built on the West Lawn property as well. And the rest of the property you see to the right side of the blue is primarily the commercial development part that will come here in the future as part of West Lawn. But the two yellow areas that you see in the lower portion of the screen here are the two areas we're talking about tonight in regards to the modifications to the buffers that were approved with the original book back in 2007. And I'll go through a couple slides here. This first box here on the left-hand side is actually the entrance to Section 5. As you can see in the bottom picture, these are the original images from the original pattern book from 2007 and 2010. So this is now going back 12 to 10 years ago in regards to when these were originally conceived as a conceptual level as buffers and such to help provide protection between the forthcoming development of West Lawn, but also those residents that live along Shores Road and protect the visibility of the homes that would be backing up to or siding to Shores to those residents that lived along Shores, but also those citizens that drove along Shores on that side as well. This first box here is outside the realm of what we're discussing tonight, but I did want to talk a little bit about it in regards to the overall buffer scheme that was out there. This is the first entrance point to Section 5. So this buffer here, as you can see, was conceived to be roughly a 20 to 50 foot buffer with a 3 to 5 foot tall berm with a mixture of different types of evergreen and deciduous plantings along it to really create more of a beautification or an entrance element. Since that time, Section 5 has been installed and completed at this point in time, so it's now in the process of its first year or so of growth, so that'll be maturing rather well here in the coming years. It has irrigation to it, so it is being irrigated on that side. The next segment, this is the first segment of what we're talking about tonight in regards to the amendment here. As you can see in the image there in the bottom of the plan view, that area there is roughly about 20 to 30 feet wide. So in the process of our dedication of right-of-way and so forth for the Shores Road, which we gave away 10 feet of that of our property back to dedication for the eventual potential expansion or widening of Shores Road at some point in time. There are no plans right now either by the city or county to do so, but we gave up the land in case that ever was a need or a necessity by either of the municipalities in regards to that roadway there. So you can see this is a very tight little niche or very, very tight little area to put a buffer in there. In the process, you can see the diagram to the bottom there. That was more or less the type of buffer cross-section that they were looking to do there, looking at roughly about a 3 or 5 foot tall berm with evergreen plantings and deciduous plantings involved in that as well. So moving forward, as we got through getting the design for Section 4 accomplished and in the ground and homes are being built today, in the conceptual side of developing a pattern book such as this and a master plan like this, sometimes the conceptual idea of what you want to do sometimes doesn't meet the reality of what's out there topographically and or spatially when the plan is actually implemented on the ground. So the disconnect that we have between the concept plan and where we are today after Section 4 was installed, and that we all come to realize that the buffers with Section 4 were not incorporated into the overall design of Section 4, that we had to come back and figure out a way to make the buffers work with the existing conditions we have after being constructed with Section 4 on that side. And doing so, a lot of analysis that we've done internally and with our client to figure out the best way that we can incorporate this buffer, was to come back and ask for modifications to the buffer, because the buffers that were being required in the original book asked for a berm to be installed between Shores Road and the back of these homes, when in actuality, based on drainage, we're required to put in drainage ditches that provide areas for us to move water that is coming off of Shores Road and off the lots that we've designed and built in West Lawn to be moved to places where we have our stormwater detention elsewhere on the property. So it's kind of hard to kind of cohabitate a vertical element and also a depressional type element in the same space. So we've asked the amendment on this is remove the berm. Also our other amendment requests are to remove the widths of the berms, the buffers that have been required in the book, and also the change in vegetation so that we can adequately screen the backs of these homes from Shores and eventually in the residents of Shores and also from West Lawn in this area. So as you can see here in this first slide, this is the first section we're talking about tonight. You can see along the image itself here in the plan view above that the back property line more or less is the center line of the center of the swale. As you can see, these points coming through here, these drainage lane, these topographic lines here are what we proposed and where it's actually been installed on the ground. So that would be a very difficult situation to remove what we are required to have in that space to make certain that stormwater that comes off of Shores Road doesn't infiltrate onto the lots that we've had built out there. To put a berm on there would be rather difficult challenge and or would then defeat the purpose of the drainage side on that side. So what we're planning on doing is going back and incorporating a double staggered row of evergreen trees, 6 foot tall at planting, to grow on the Shores Road side of the downhill portion of the grading going down to the bottom of the swale on that. So we're still meeting the commitments that were actually requested in the original PUD book back in 2007, 2010, but asking for the modification to remove the berming elements so that we don't have to figure out a way to work with the drainage to make that work, to have a berm where you're actually necessitating a drainage structure in there, but it's still maintaining the vegetative portion on that. So as you can see in the cross section we've got below on that side, you can kind of get a little bit of a cross section where Shores Road is today. The right of way prior to our 10 foot of dedication is in this space here. The existing vegetation that's out there. And then coming down to our swale that comes off the back sides of the homes and lots over here, we're proposing to put that buffering material on this downhill slope coming from Shores back here, while at the same token not disturbing the existing vegetation that's still in growth out there right now. So we're going to try to, what we're going to do is more or less leave the existing vegetation, the tall trees and such that are out there along that existing right-of-way area out there right now, and come back and add this material to enhance the buffering qualities of the existing materials that are out there today to make certain that we're still adequately screening the backs of the homes from Shores Road on that side. Move forward. The next section here is to the east of the Section 4 entrance off of Shores Road where the amenity complex is down there. Again, this had two different cross sections of buffers in there, so we have that side. So you can see the same kind of context of what they wanted to do buffering system-wise in this area, but more or less that came through along the backs of the roads and then came across this piece back here, and then I'll talk about the last segment down here. But this is our proposed planting scheme that we have right now in regards to this piece right next to the entrance. So the entrance to Section 4 and the amenities over here. This area here, we're incorporating as much as we can of the existing vegetation. When they came through and did the grading for this ditch, they did a very good job of providing that drainage swale to wander through a number of the trees that were out there in that area. So we're going to keep with the motif of what was left in regards to that and enhance that portion there. And where that existing material peters out more or less with the rest of the remaining of this drainage ditch, go back, and then this time we're going to actually incorporate the double staggered row of evergreen trees on the uphill slope leading to the back of the lots on this side. So more or less you're going to have an existing row of vegetation that's out here along the Shores Road area right now and being undisturbed. Our drainage swale more or less kind of running between the existing and proposed vegetation out there. So we're really getting a very double layer of vegetative buffering going on in this portion of the corridor. And the last little segment here, this is the tightest portion here we have. You're roughly about 15 feet from the back of the lots to the new right-of-way where we gave our 10-foot dedication back. So it's a very narrow corridor, and you can see that they incorporated that idea that it was going to be kind of a tight niche in regards to what was going to be able to be provided from a buffering standpoint. So you can see they were simply looking at doing a single row of evergreen material along this little segment back here, which is more or less along the back lot line of one of these lots on the, it comes off the cul-de-sac back here, but, you know, we'll tie that back in this portion here. So coming back and looking at our proposed design on that side, you can see that the buffering that we had that was part of the previous section will still be a double staggered row until we get down to this area here where we have the backs of this lot here coming off the cul-de-sac to where we go back to a single row. But again, still maintaining the existing vegetation that's out there today. So we'll be working in conjunction with the existing vegetation along that Shores Road corridor out there on that side. So more or less you can see that kind of motif there that you're leading. This point here, this is kind of a high point in Shores Road, so this drainage all comes down, so we've been able to pick that up and pull it around the side of the lot on that side. These are just a couple of images of what you can see from today's existing conditions out there in regards to the proximity of the rear of these homes and their fences and their outdoor equipment on that side in regards to the existing vegetation that's been out there. So you can see they did a very good job of when installing these lots, that the drainage swale you see running through here right now, they did a very good job of putting that swale in to maintain getting the drainage water and the stormwater effectively off of Shores Road and off the lots without the water getting in the lots, but effectively still maintaining the existing vegetation along Shores Road. So we would be looking at, in this kind of corridor, installing that double staggered row of evergreen trees between the rear property line and the bottom of the swale running along this section through there. So that's kind of what we're trying to say is that we're still meeting our commitments in regards to what the original book wanted, but we just don't have the opportunity to provide the berming elements, but we're still going to be able to provide the vegetative element to help screen that. So, and again, here's another piece of that. This shows you a little bit more of a deeper cross section in regards to that drainage swale coming through here. And again, the heavy vegetation along Shores Road over here, where we'll be installing that landscaping along this side of the ditch, while on the other side of the ditch, the existing vegetation will remain in place. And this is just kind of showing you some of the views looking straight at the existing vegetation to show the density of the plant material that's out there that will be undisturbed in regards to Shores Road is about 15, 20 feet beyond this viewpoint is where Shores Road is. So you really can't see through this. And by throwing in an extra double row of evergreen trees, you're never going to really see it on the other side of this on that side. Again, this is some of the areas where it's a little weaker in the vegetation existing today, but I mean that growth is going to continue to grow because we're not going to be disturbing it, plus enhancing it with our proposed vegetation on that side. So I appreciate your time tonight in consideration of this amendment to the PUD book, and I'm here for any questions now or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Melchan. Okay, so we will open the public hearing if nobody has any questions. Will that invite anybody to come up that would like to speak for or against this application?
Ray Mathis, 3521 Shores Road. I live directly south of the last area he was talking about. The development started in about 2008. They did the site grading, prepped everything, then the Great Recession hit. Nothing happened for almost a decade, except Mother Nature kept working. The growth that grew up between Shores Road and the development is very pretty. It's very thick. You cannot see the development from my driveway. So I stand in support of their proposal, as long as there is for across the road from where I live, they put up a berm while we're doing the site planning, apparently trying to get it ahead of everything. And the growth has grown up on that burn. So as I say, I support their proposal as long as that berm is not disturbed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. Anybody else?
I live in the West Lawn subdivision, pretty much opposite of this gentleman back here. I'm in absolute support of leaving the trees.
And can you just go ahead and state your name and address?
Oh, I'm sorry. Bobby Davis, 6327 Hickory Bell Drive.
Thank you.
So absolute support the leaving of the trees. What I do have concern about is the SEC has marked taped sticks in the tree line. And I'm not sure exactly what that means. And I know that that question has been posed to this group at one point. So I'm not sure what is going to come of that. My concern is even with the property south of Shores Road, what ends up happening is if we give our 10 feet, this tree line could potentially be ripped out at some point anyway if the road was widened. Now, if they're going to add trees behind it, we're in favor of that, but if you see the pictures, it looks like it's still below the elevation of, obviously kind of into that slope of drainage. And at least my property is closer to the, I want to say, east of that kind of triangle that he's talking about. So I have a lot of barren land behind me before the trees even hit. And, you know, if they're going to propose putting some kind of berm, at least in maybe that section, that makes sense, maybe modification. And the reason why I bring that up is simply because there's a big pile of dirt back there that I think was originally left there to do the project with that hasn't been addressed as well. So I know that he showed some pictures of vegetation, but there's also a huge mound of dirt with trees and shrub and gross sticks growing out of it. So anyway, that's back there, and I think the whole purpose of that pile of dirt was left specifically for this project. So something's got to be done with that as well. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Okay. We'll close this public hearing. And so either Ms. Rush or Mr. Melchan want to address a couple of the questions we had.
I'll address the comments that Mr. Davis had in regards to the stakes. The stakes are the stakes we put out there for us to more or less help figure out how to design this appropriately out there. That is actually the stakes of the actual property line after our right-of-way dedication of the 10-foot. So those stakes were placed out there for us to figure out where the property line was, to figure out what we would be able to do spatially between the invisible line in the sand out there in regards to the roadway that would be forthcoming someday down the road, whoever knows if that will even happen on that side, and the rear property line. So be more or less giving us a bearing of where we are spatially to figure out, hey, if this is where the property line is right now in regards to the future right-of-way, these trees here are things we want to save, and then whatever space we have left in between those, you know, the property line of the roadway and the back of these lots, where's the best space for us to work? So we did that to go out there and figure out exactly where we were in regards to coming up with these plans I've showed you tonight on that side. And like I said, you know, these are just preliminary construction plans to help at least give an idea about what we're going to bring forth. But these will have to come before Marina and the rest of the staff for approval on that side as well to make certain that they're adequate on that side. So that's what those stakes are out there for. It's just simply more or less a marking in the ground for us to figure out how to make this work out on that side. As Mr. Mathis had talked about, like I said, all that vegetation I showed you today is vegetation that was, you know, a typical tree row kind of vegetation along the right-of-way. That's what we're trying to preserve in regards to that. And like I said, our 10-foot dedication is for a roadway that may or may never be expanded upon. I know I've talked with staff and that there are no plans at the moment or any time in the near future to expand Shores Road. I mean, it is pretty much a county road that leads out to a lot of very large tracts of land, and it's also a very, you know, it's an area that's not very conducive for large-scale development out that way. It's a very flood-prone, it's a very sinkhole-ridden area out that way on that side. So any development out Shores Road is going to be very much on a very smaller scale, you know, larger tracts of land out there. So I don't think there's a lot of, you know, work in regards to, you know, that roadway being expanded anytime in the near future on that side. On that. In regards to the berm that Mr. Davis talked about that's out there in that triangular area that's out there, that land, I mean, I can't speak because Horton came in after the project was kind of moving down the road at some point in time before the recession kicked in, but that pile of dirt is out there, and it does have a lot of scrub brush, a lot of scrub trees growing on it, so it has been out there for a very long time, just like a lot of the vegetation that's out there that we're trying to preserve along the roadway. As to whether or not that was for, you know, the eventuality of the berm that was supposed to be installed per the original PUD, I don't know, but our goal is to more or less leave that, you know, pile of dirt there with the existing vegetation on it, let it keep growing as part of our berming process, part of our planting process on that side, because it is a vertical element with natural vegetation growing out, which provides the best screening you can ask for in regards to this area.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Rob, it sounds like the referred to dirt pile is a berm and kind of serves the purpose of a berm as it was intended to be, but now that it's not going to be used, that it still would serve as a berm and would have the natural growth on it of what grows in the south on a property that's unmaintained. And I think Mr. Mathis had a good summation on the paperwork that he forwarded to us, and says, conclusion, sometimes change is warranted. In this case, nature has provided a beautiful solution. To tear it down would be a mistake. And I think that summarizes, as well as anybody could say, what the situation with this property is, because I think what you're wanting to do is leave it like it is, guarantee that there will be some evergreen buffer there, so even if some of these plants do drop leaves in the wintertime, the buffer still remains. It's just better buffer in the summertime when it is green, and I think it's an excellent solution to a problem that really doesn't exist.
And I do, and it is a good point to think about it that way in regards to what we plant now will grow like that stuff that's out there today, and that growth will continue to grow as the time goes. And if for some way right down the road that Shores Road ever is expanded and any of that vegetation is knocked out, there will be time for that buffer that we're providing today to grow and fill in and provide that extra layer of buffer that we're asking about today. It may become the only buffer that's out there, but right now, I think you get a double buffer, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to let this thing get going and growing and establishing and, you know, setting up for the future. Thank you.
So tonight, we are going to be requesting a deferral until October 2nd, or
Yes, that's been the request, and I believe D.R. Horton has communicated that to several residents in the HOA, that they will be conducting a neighborhood meeting, and they would bring it back for your decision at a later date, so the October meeting.
Move for deferral.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our next item will be a mandatory referral and right-of-way abandonment to consider the abandonment of existing road rights-of-way adjacent to the Murfreesboro Housing Authority property, including East Loki Avenue, North Academy Street, Jeton Drive, Christie Court, and Palm Court. Huddleston Steel Engineering, Inc. is the applicant. Ms. Kerr, welcome.
Thank you, Chairwoman Jones, Planning Commission. This area is 3.67 acres of various right-of-ways proposed to be abandoned within or adjacent to the Murfreesboro Housing Authority Oakland Court development. It consists of partial rights-of-ways of North Academy Street from Palm Court north to East Hombre Street, East Loki Avenue from just west of North Academy Street, east to just east of Christie Court, and Jeton Drive, East Hombre Street, south to East Loki Avenue. It also consists of the abandonment of the entire rights-of-ways of Christie Court and Palm Court. The Murfreesboro Housing Authority property is approximately 20 acres in area and is currently zoned residential duplex. The Murfreesboro Housing Authority has submitted a rezoning request for the property to be rezoned to PRD for the redevelopment of Oakland Court. The City Council will be conducting a public hearing on the rezoning request on September the 19th. These right-of-way abandonments are necessary for the implementation of the Murfreesboro Housing Authority proposed redevelopment plan. Some of the streets included in this study are proposed to go away completely, while others are proposed to be rerouted. It is likely that some of the requested rights-of-ways may not need to be abandoned once civil details are designed. The applicant, however, asked for the maximum amount of right-of-way that may need to be abandoned, knowing that it could be scaled back after approval is necessary. Included in the agenda materials is the right-of-way abandonment study prepared by staff. No departments or agencies that were contacted indicated any oppositions to the right-of-way abandonment. However, several of them indicated the need for the retention of easements in the proposed right-of-way abandonment areas. Staff recommends that any approval of the right-of-way abandonment request be made subject to the following comments. North Academy Street shall remain public. The quitclaim deed abandoning this segment of right-of-way shall not be recorded until a plat dedicating new right-of-way has been recorded. That East Loki Avenue from North Academy Street westward shall remain public. The quitclaim deed abandoning this segment of right-of-way shall not be recorded until a plat dedicating a new right-of-way has been recorded. That a public to private transition delineation shall be provided at the eastern terminus of East Loki Avenue right-of-way. All existing and proposed drainage ways shall be placed in drainage easements meeting city standards. In addition, utility easements shall be recorded to accommodate existing utilities as needed, including but not limited to sanitary sewer, electric, Comcast, and AT&T. The applicant shall be required to submit the necessary documents to the legal department required to draft the quitclaim deed. The applicant shall be responsible for recording the quitclaim deed, and the abandonment right-of-way shall be incorporated into the existing parcels via a subdivision plat recorded by the Register of Deeds office. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which it will need to discuss this matter of closing and abandonment of these right-of-ways, and then formulate a recommendation to City Council. I'll be available to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Questions? We'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this item. Anybody left over there? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Questions or comments or motions?
There are no comments. Can we do a so moved based on all of Ms. Kerr's comments? That'd be the easiest way to do that.
Second.
Absolutely. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Our last public hearing tonight is a mandatory referral and right-of-way abandonment to consider the abandonment of a segment of East Sevier Street right-of-way east of South Academy Street. SEC Inc. is the applicant. Ms. Carr.
Thank you. This right-of-way consists of a small segment of East Sevier Street east of South Academy Street. The segment of right-of-way is approximately 50 feet wide by 230 foot deep and dead ends into the Old City Cemetery. The area adjacent to the subject right-of-way on its north and south sides are zoned Commercial Highway and City Core Overlay District. The adjacent property to the north is developed with 2 single-family homes, and the adjacent property to the south is largely undeveloped but does contain a gravel parking area. The subject right-of-way is paved, and there is a circular gravel driveway on its north side to provide access to the property to the north. The owner of the property to the south, Greenhouse Ministries, has planned to expand its facilities onto the property to the south of the subject right-of-way. Because this right-of-way appears to be in excess and no longer in need for its intended public purpose, Greenhouse Ministries has requested that it be abandoned. Greenhouse Ministries proposes to incorporate the right-of-way into their private property with a private drive leading into the proposed development, which will include an access easement for the existing driveway for the houses to the north located at 223 South Academy Street. Included in your agenda materials is a right-of-way abandonment study. No departments or agencies that were contacted indicated any opposition to the right-of-way abandonment. However, there were several of them indicated the need for the retention of easements within the proposed right-of-way abandonment area. Staff recommends any approval of the right-of-way abandonment request be made subject to these following comments. The applicant shall be required to submit the necessary documents to the legal department required to draft the quitclaim deed. The applicant shall be responsible for the recording of the quitclaim deed, and the abandoned right-of-way will be incorporated into the existing parcel via a subdivision plat recorded at the Register of Deeds office. Utility and access easements shall be recorded to accommodate the existing residents and utilities, including but not limited to sanitary sewer, electric, Comcast, and AT&T. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which it will need to discuss this matter of closing and abandonment of this right-of-way, and then formulate a recommendation to City Council. And I will be available to answer any questions at the conclusion of the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. All right, we will open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this item.
My name is Michael Barrett. I represent the controlling interests of the property adjacent to Greenhouse, and we are in objection to the abandonment of the road. At this time, we feel like it could hinder our redevelopment of the property. My brother and I, we've often wondered why the city abandoned that road about 40 years ago, or even 30 years ago when they did the redevelopment. We would like to see the streets and curbs and gutters come in there. And you know what development has gone on down there in the Bradley area and stuff. And Greenhouse, we're in objection to it. And I represent me and my 3 other brothers and my mother of the owners of the property. And at this time, we are in objection. My brother will speak.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
My name is Ben Barrett, and as my brother said, we're in objection to the closing of this street. I admire what Greenhouse Ministries is trying to do. I mean, they really have done a lot for homeless people and poor people, and unfortunately, along with good people, there comes a lot of people that just quite frankly are bums. And we have been dealing with them for the last 2 years. Greenhouse Ministries is in the old Beatty building, but ever since they bought the property adjacent to us on the other side of Sevier Street, it has become kind of a parking lot or a campground. And homeless people have also parked on Sevier Street and have left us a great deal of garbage and stuff. There was a van parked at the end of Sevier Street for probably 6 months or longer, and they left us with a trailer load of garbage, a makeshift latrine, a box with no bottom to it with a hole cut in it. And I assume they were taking that over into our property at night and using that. And anyway, it has just become a nuisance to us. Before, you know, Greenhouse Ministries, and when they were in the old Beatty building, it was okay. But ever since they, bought the property there across from us, it's become a parking lot and a campground, and we have been dealing with it. We have had, in our 2 houses there on Academy, we've had the doors kicked in. They've kicked in a big hole in the side of our building. There's no water or electricity in either one of those buildings. They're just storage buildings. But we cannot keep the homeless people or the bums. There are people that will not help themselves. And they are sleeping on our porches. You cannot imagine the garbage that they are leaving on us. Like I say, I admire the work that Greenhouse Ministries is doing, but they have brought a menace on us. And really, they are too close. We would like to sell our property to Greenhouse Ministries if they do so desire, and then they can do whatever they want to with the street. But they have made no offer to us, and if they're not interested in buying our property, we have considered maybe developing that and putting in a Dollar General store there. My father bought this property, started acquiring these properties back in 1966 because he thought it would be valuable someday, and I believe it is. It's only 2 blocks away from our only skyscraper in Murfreesboro, or in Rutherford County. It is a valuable piece of property. And, but what we've been dealing with, you cannot imagine. We have, since Greenhouse Ministries acquired the property across the street from us, well, we have had the police over at our property more than once to run people off. Young men look like well-bodied, you know, able to work, and yet they're over there sleeping on our porches, leaving a ton of garbage. I mean, quart beer bottles, liquor bottles, toiletries, wet clothes,
Do you have
sleeping
anything
bags.
further to add? I appreciate the fact that you've waited a long time to speak tonight, so I've given you much more than your 3 minutes. Is there anything new to add to that?
I guess the top of it is we object to it, and they are defecating on our porches. Shh. They are defecating on our porches and then laying down and sleeping beside it. I don't understand how people can live like that.
Okay, thank you.
And okay, well, you keep distracting me, huh? Okay, well, we are in objection to it.
Thank you.
Well, Greenhouse Ministries, I know, wants to dissolve the street so that they can move a little closer. And as the way that I see it, they are too close as it is. In fact, for the last 2 years in dealing with this and taking my shovel and my pitchfork and shoveling this stuff up, I feel like they are too close already. In fact, I feel like they are already on top of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Barrett. Anybody else?
Yes, good evening. I'm Bill Ronsley. I'm the CEO of Greenhouse Ministries. Been there for a little less than 2 years. Couldn't agree more with this man about how tough it is to deal with a certain population of the folks that are in the city. The things he's describing happen a lot, and it happens all over the city. It's not unique to where we are at Greenhouse. We seek to help. Let me just put it this way: last year we helped 8,000 people in this city. This city has 35,000 people at the poverty level coming next year when we take our census. We're seeking to change that by planting hope in the folks, by giving them things that they need, practical things that they need, so that they can get hope and start changing their life. That's why we do things like help, educate, and then we have a mentoring program. This building is not just about a nice thing to do. This building, we are crammed where we are. We have a thrift store operation plus a warehouse operation where we collect donations. We're seeking to separate those out so that we can deal with these people. When I say deal with these people, please don't hear that as they're numbers. They're not numbers. There's 35,000 people that need help. We want to help them. We're putting it in a place where we can talk to somebody. We can have it in a room where they can have confidentiality, but today we don't have that. We seek to have classrooms where we're not crunching people from one place to another. And we also are looking at having a second floor where we're going to have housing. This would be 17 apartments, actually 18 apartments. There'd be a full-time person there. This would be for men. We designed a program where we're going to take men who are at the poverty level, deal with take them through a course of action over 18 months to 2 years, You can call it a little bit of a boot camp. We're going to address things, life skills. We're going to address their spiritual skills. We're going to address their financial skills. We're going to address their education skills and their capacity to become better citizens in the city. We designed this building and looked to put it in the backside of that property originally, and we're not allowed to do that. So in compliance with what the rules are today, we have to move it forward. And in order to do that and keep the parking that we need to do, that's why we're asking for this abandonment. I make one note that we are in the Beatty building and have very little parking. We have only only parking that's out front, and the parking that's on back is owned by NHC, and they allow us graciously to have those things. In regards to the cars that are there, we have had a tremendous amount of generosity in this last 2 years, where people are actually donating cars. Those cars have actually been, we placed them over there. We have a mechanic that we bring in. They actually repair those cars, and we are selling those cars at a discount. We're selling them at a, how would you say this right? We're working with people to acquire a car as opposed to charging them interest. So we're making real deals with people to let them have transportation. There were some people there that we didn't want there. We asked them to leave several times, and we've had them actually, and recently as even today, had a van that was towed away. Sometimes it's not easy to get people to just even leave your own property there. I would ask you to consider this, and I like the gentleman's offer. We'll bring that to the board about talking about purchasing his property at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anybody else that would like to speak? Okay. We will close the public hearing. Ms. Kerr, would you like to address some of the questions and concerns we've had tonight?
Well, this is just for the abandonment of the property. It's not for the disposal of the property. That is a different process. The city's policy is generally to split the property down the middle. Half would go to one property owner and half would go to the other property owner. If either property owner can legally say that they originally owned that right of way and it was made into Sevier Street, then that property owner would receive the entire portion of the property. I'm assuming that there could be discussions. I'm not really certain when there is a request to not.
Has there ever been any discussion at the city about continuing or extending this portion of Sevier Street on this right of way?
And it dead ends into the cemetery. And it doesn't have a gate. It just dead ends.
Please, you're out of order. Please don't interrupt.
So I guess there cannot be a disposition until the property is abandoned, is really the issue we're talking about.
Correct.
And then that's a separate issue, how we do that once it is abandoned, the disposition.
And I believe the actual disposition would be something would be approved by City Council. I think Planning Commission, for the most part, will be looking at should this street be closed and should this property be, the real estate under the old street be abandoned? Do we have any more use for this as a city street? And if not, then it would be, City Council would make the determination. And as Ms. Kerr said, the starting point is that we divide it down the middle. Sometimes a property owner can show that all of the property of this street came from my property previously, and if that's the case, then they would be entitled to get all of it back rather than half of it go to the neighbor. I have done some looking back at the title. I've not seen anything that would indicate one way or the other. I haven't tried to go all the way back, so I have no opinion at this point. I did do some looking, and I don't see anything that indicates that it came half from each or that it all came from one side or the other. So that's something that I get. If Greenhouse is asking for all of the property, it would be up to them to show us that it all came from the property that they now own. Otherwise, they'd have to reach some agreement with the Barretts, or I think the city would be pretty well bound to split it down the middle.
Okay. No, sir. No, sir. Any other questions or comments? I would think really, I mean, if there's no, the city has no intention or reason that we could make use of that right-of-way and extend that road, seems like a right-of-way abandonment, division of the property, would be the logical thing to do. My opinion.
I'm of the opinion that whatever we do here with respects to this application is not going to solve the issues that have been brought up tonight. I think that's going to be a relationship between Greenhouse and the Barretts. And that being said, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the right-of-way abandonment, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. No, sir. Next, we have staff reports and other business. Mr. Anthony.
Don't forget, we have a retreat on the 27th. We're working right now so you're not just listening to us for 4 hours. So we've been able to get Bill Terry, who is the lobbyist for the Tennessee chapter of the American Planning Association. He's going to come and talk to us about legislation, things that he expects to go forward and things that have recently been passed. So he has a lot of insight because he works with that every day. And also, Darren Gore has committed to come and talk about the sewer policy that we keep hearing so much about, and so we've asked that he come and talk to the Planning Commission. So we've scheduled him for that as well, and we're continuing to work with others. I'm hoping to get somebody to come talk about the Parks Master Plan as well.
Great. Okay. So, any other business?
Nothing else? I have nothing.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Then we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.